We're live. All right, Matt, you go ahead and start things out while I send out the notifications here so that we get a few people that'll know we're gone live anyways.
Alrighty, well, if you guys haven't known, you're going to find out in this podcast, and we'll see if this podcast actually makes it out there and doesn't get deplatformed or censored, but major leaks were broke on the internet last night. The Hunter Biden, not only did emails come out, we got actual now footage and video. Sex tapes and all, folks, are finally released on the web if you know where to look. So it's all coming out, and it's all part of this operation, which I'm going to explain to you guys right now. I'm going to read it for you. So most people don't realize that in the modern world, we don't have war like we did in the World War I and II, where you have physical men riding over in ships on shores and battling it out for the masses and for their leaders to conquer land. How we do it now is it's played dirty. It's dirty, and it's dirty-handed tactics. So here's how the China Communist Party likes to run their programs. So they have a program that they call the BGY program. It stands for blue, gold, yellow. This program, and when I say this program, it's run by the intelligence agencies of the CCP, China's Communist Party. Now, blue.
Who's down with CCP?
For, yeah,
not me. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
So the concept of this program, the Chinese Communist Party has the BGY program in the United States and in several Western countries in Europe. We have millions of videos and photos of government officials, corrupt people, traitors, criminals colluding with the Communist Party to dominate the world. Doesn't matter what country you're from, what ethnicity or color you are, what party you belong to, the next person to be abused may be your daughter, your wife, your sister, so there's no ethical border when it comes to eliminating the Chinese Communist Party. And this guy's going on basically to tell how it's the Central Intelligence Agencies of the China's Communist Party, and they're basically working with Biden. So this program, the blue, you go back to it. Blue, gold, green, blue, gold, yellow. So gold stands for they figure out if they can bribe you off as a politician through money. We all know that. Bribery in politics has been happening since the founding of it. And we always got to ask the question, why is a politician who makes a salary of $100,000 to $200,000 a year living in a $16 million home like Nancy Pelosi and some of these other people? So the Chinese Communist Party, what they do is they figure out, how can we infiltrate countries, take down their regimes, control their government officials? And they use this methodology of first seeking out if they can control you by money. Is there a number that they can pay you off with to get you to pass their legislation and to control your masters and to promote communism? Exactly. And to promote the ideas of communism in the Western world and socialism as a way to try to take down America from within, not by riding enemies up to the shore and attacking America and taking it by force, because they know they can't do that. America's the #1 military power on the world, not to mention the population of America is well armed. So how do they got to take down America? Because you got to think, China is the second most powerful country in the world, America being the first. China's very ambitious, and they want to become #1. So they're figuring out, how do we do this? How do we take down America? And they're going to take down America from within. Now, they were successful with finding out people have a price. You know, like my father said, it could be for some people $1 trillion. For the Biden family, it was actually, a couple billion. So pretty hefty amount that was paid off to the Bidens to gain their control. But another method that they use is, and we know this, is they try to seep up all the data they can on you. This is why you got things like TikTok apps and all these other social media platforms. They're gathering data. Now, why are they gathering the data? They're trying to figure out, what porn do you search? What's your kinks? Are you overweight? Are you cheating on your wife? Are you have all these different things? Just data. They take it in like a giant sponge. And then they look through that data and say, can we poke holes in that data as ways to control this person? So maybe they call a politician up and they say, hey, we want to pay you off, and we want you to promote communism in America. No, screw you. We'll give you $1 billion. Screw you. You can't buy me off. Well, how about we release photos of you wanking it on the web, or we release videos of you having an affair on your wife and all these. So they use these tactics next. If you don't got a monetary way they can take you down, now they're going to use information and blackmail.
Mm.
And then let me try to find it. I'll find it after. But so what I'm trying to explain to you guys and trying to get you to understand is politics, the way that they exist, you think, where you're just going to the polls and voting for these politicians, is not really how it happens. Look back in the last couple centuries. You've always had either Bushes, Clintons, Obamas. You've had these certain families in power for a long time. And you know, Bill Clinton was a sexual predator. The guy got impeached for getting a blowjob in the Oval Office. So clearly they had blackmail on him. Now, an interesting thing to note, and this is a little bit of conspiracy theory if you want to spin off of it. Imagine if Monica Lewinsky was maybe a Chinese asset. You never know. But these are the type of things that people got to realize, and if they don't find dirt on you, sometimes they create scenarios in which they can get dirt. So maybe they have a politician who's walking to his car one night and they hire an escort or a prostitute and they send her after him, and she just starts flirting with them and says, "Oh, I just need to drive home, blah, 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 blah." And that opens the door of maybe she can try to get that politician to take her up to his room and catch him having, intercourse with her or something like that. And then that can be used as a blackmail. This is called honeypotting. The CIA has used this technique very well in the past as well. So these are the things that's going on right now in politics. Nancy Pelosi is compromised, Obama's compromised, and a lot of these people in power, whether it's on the Republican Party or Democratic Party, is compromised. And if there's one thing I want you to gather at the end of this video, is this is how people in today's society rise to prominency and power, whether it's in the celebrity realm and Hollywood and in movies and these things. It always comes down to compromised people. So, that's how this world functions nowadays. So immediately when you see people in power, be suspicious of it and say, I wonder what kind of compromised material got them into that position. So I'm going to pass it over to my father if he wants to give anything to say so far. Like, you haven't seen anything to do with the Hunter Biden stuff at all. Like, I know you've been busy this week, so I'm kind of just breaking it here with you as well.
Yeah. Well, I've kind of heard a little bit, like I keep hearing, especially because, at night I don't get a whole lot of time by the time I have my supper and all that stuff after work. But I did hear about the whole laptop thing. And of course, I've watched a few minutes of Trump's rallies there on YouTube because it gets recommended to me. And I hear him talking about the laptop and some pretty crazy stuff that got found on it. And of course, we all know anyways, like that's the thing for me. It's not surprising. None of this stuff is shocking to me. Of course, like this corrupt politicians, that's just part and parcel. That's the point of why I identify as a libertarian or a philosophical anarchist, is because yes, I recognize that power has a corrupting nature, and these people. I mean, Biden, was he been? I'm 50 years old. The man's been a politician for almost as long as I've been alive. If you think you're going to live in the belly of the beast and function in there for that long time without massively being corrupted and having every aspect of who you are and your humanity compromised, well, like I say, the people that believe that people can run in these positions for such periods of time without that happening, they're dystopian, or I should say utopian thinkers, because that's just the reality. That's why the whole point and the premise of libertarian thought, or the philosophy of liberty, is no, you greatly reduce, or ultimately at some point in time, hopefully eliminate the potential of having people that are rulers in the first place, because of course they're going to use that position or that pretense of power authority to enrich themselves at other people's expense and benefit themselves, like I say, whether it's politically, socially, or economically. But once again, there's always a trade-off for that. If you're benefiting some people, part of the connected class, then there's going to be a compromise where someone is suffering. There's going to be, so whether it's the pedophilia shit that we know that's taking place, we know this is a reality. Can I point out every single individual or who's part and parcel of it, or is there a big circle of it? How would I know? I have no insider knowledge or privy to that, but I definitely know that there are very corrupt unethical, and immoral people on this planet. And if you give them the power, whether it's over children, and once again, it's not even the political class. I mean, think about how many times we heard, whether it's teachers or preachers or priests, people who are in positions of authority that have access to young people. Because once again, it's not just about power, it's about control. Control is a very, very corrupting aspect. And humanity, most human beings have lacked the ability to not be susceptible to falling for this kind of power, this kind of corruption. So, like I say, to me, it's very important for people to understand that whether it's the vulnerable in terms of children or people who are disenfranchised or not part of the connected or the ruling class, those are the people who are always going to be suffering as a consequence of the corrupting nature of the political, the ruling class. And as we're seeing today, it's one thing. We all know, this is the thing. We all know that this is a potential, this is a reality. But historically, the point of having, a media or news organization is to hold these kind of people that are in so-called positions of authority to account. But what we're seeing today is most of the hacks in the establishment media have also gained from that massive amount of corruption and power. They've been grabbing the power just as much as the political class. So the media class and the political class, and of course the moneyed class, the banksters, right, the central bank, they're all making out like pigs, and they're lining up like pigs at the trough, making out like bandits, like I say, at everyone else's expense. The difference is today is the media, because they're falling in line with it, the people who are looking to them for guidance and to tell them what they should be doing or who are the corrupt, they're actually confused and fighting amongst each other because the media has been spending most of their time creating division among the people and creating the atmosphere where we're perceiving of each other as the threat rather than those who are in charge of the political or the media or all these other institutions who, once again, are the ones that are causing the most harm. So to me, as much as there's a lot of blame to go around, I constantly find it's those in the media, and why people like you or I have to step up the plate and talk about these things. We'd have a lot better. I'm 100% certain that you and I would have a lot better things to deal with in the run of our life or on a weekend such as today on a Sunday. But hey, somebody's got to do it. And because there is a lack of those in the establishment media who are willing to hold that mirror up to the corrupt ruling class, well, it's our job, I guess. It's not a job, I guess, per se, but it's something I feel compelled to do, and so do you. So that's what we're doing today. Is that, we're gonna tear off the binders, or the blinders, I should say, and rip open the shades and show people and reveal just what in the hell is taking place in this corrupt, massively corrupt world, and why people should start to be more concerned about this stuff.
All right, so I had to give you a minute to talk there because I had to gather myself. Because when I first sat down, we're about 12 minutes into this, and I got to do a better way of explaining the severity of what's going on right now. And I was a little excited at first. So I'm going to break it down, walk everyone through the process now,
all right,
and break it down to you.
No, just kidding. Go ahead.
Okay, so first off, I want you, Dad, to go to Google and search for an individual whose name is G-U-O.
G-U-O. Yep. Wengu?
Yeah, and his last name, W-E-N-G-U-I.
Yeah, that's the first thing that came up.
Guo Wangu. I think it's Guo Wangu or something like that. He says.
Wow Wangu.
Okay.
Wengi. Okay.
Now,
so what are we doing? Just wiki here?
Yeah, you can just wiki him if you want, and you can I'll give a quick read out of his wiki as well while you're looking at a guy. If you want, you can put a photo up of him for people to see.
Oh, okay, we'll do that here.
So this individual, I will read his wiki. He also goes by Miles. He's a Chinese billionaire businessman who became a political activist and controls Beijing holdings and other assets. At the peak of his career, he was the 73rd richest man in China. So this man is a billionaire.
Oh, he was born in 1970?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
50 years old. Okay.
Same age as me.
So this individual rose to prominence, made a lot of money in China. Obviously, 73rd richest man in China. So now what do we understand about China? You don't get to be that rich under the CCP control unless they allow it, because they are a gangster mafia government. So you don't get to be that rich unless you're towing the line, right? So this guy worked alongside the CCP over his years while he worked in China. And through working along side by side with the CCP individuals high up in the government, he got to see how unethical their tactics are and how corrupt they are. And he got to witness how China slid each day into a more authoritarian dictatorship run by Xi Jinping. He didn't like this stuff, and he started to speak out. And when he started to speak out about some of the stuff, China went after him, and he fled to America, and he's now an exiled Chinese dissident in America, and that's where he's held up. So he has a lot of dirt on the CCP because, like I just said, you don't get to be the 73rd richest man in China worth billions of dollars unless the CCP knows about you and is obviously allowing it. Because if you were doing something they didn't like, they just come and take and seize all your assets. They're communist nation. So he then flees to America. Now, why is he important? He has all this dirt. He starts to come to America and he starts to speak out about some of how the CCP is run and how it's a bunch of mafia organization. And what does the CCP do to this man? A common tactic that the Chinese Communist Party uses is if they can't get you as an individual, they go after your family. So they started targeting his mother, his cousins, anyone that they can get who is related to him. They targeted and they arrested them, they jailed them, killed, whatever you can imagine they did to these people, which only made this individual even more mad. So now my father just brought up the next photo, which is very important. The individual in this photo, as you can see, that is Mayor Rudy Giuliani in the middle. He has his hands on an individual who is also a Chinese dissident and who is one of the creators of G Media. What is G Media? So Mr. Guowing, Mr. Miles, Chinese billionaire, came over to America and he knew he wanted to blow the whistle on the corruption involving the Chinese Communist Party and how that they were also in bed and were using blackmail techniques against a lot of American politicians, such as the Hunter family, the Biden family, and stuff like that, right? So he knew that if he wanted to start releasing this information eventually that he had and he had obtained while being over in China, if he put it on Twitter, if he put it on Facebook, if he put it on YouTube, that stuff would get censored. And guess what, guys? It's getting censored today, and as we're seeing. So he's smart. He thought of this. So he started a project where he used his billions of dollars that he earned in China to build his own media platforms. One of them is called, like I said, GTV, gtv.org. It's a website, and you can also get it as an app. He developed this app and website with the individual who has his, Rudy Giuliani has his hands around. So a lot of this information you're coming out right now about the Hunter Biden family, I'm trying to show you and connect the dots of where it's coming from. So also in this photo, lurking over Rudy Giuliani's shoulders, if you can see, is Steve Bannon creeping in the background. Why is Steve Bannon important? Steve Bannon was the first person that when Guo came to America and he wanted to start talking to people, he understood that the American political class was corrupt as well. That he was living under Obama and stuff like that. And he himself had personal information and knowledge that the Obamas and the Bidens were all paid off, blackmail, and corrupt. So he knew he couldn't go to those people and say, hey, I'm going to blow the whistle on you guys. So he made connections with the Trump team. Now, Trump didn't really want to touch this with a 10-foot pole because why? The media is going to spin it as if he was working with Russia. He was working with someone to try to get foreign dirt on his political enemies. I'll get you to put that photo back up in a minute, but I'll keep talking.
Okay.
So who does Mr. Chinese billionaire Miles go to and make his connection? He makes his connection with Steve Bannon. This is also why probably about a year ago you've seen a viral video of Steve Bannon on a ship in the South China Sea talking about how he was working and wheeling and dealing on trying to take down the Chinese Communist Party. So this is why these four individuals are important. You have Mr. Rudy Giuliani. Now, so you got Guo. Let me step back here. You got Guo, who has all this information and dirt on the Biden family. He's in America. He hires the guy who Rudy's holding his shoulder to build social media platforms as a way when the time comes to put this information out. He makes connections with the Trump team, but nobody wants to touch it because the political repercussions of it and the media spinoff. So they have Steve Bannon, who exiles himself from the Trump campaign and goes off and does his own thing. This gives him the protection now to work with Guo and to start figuring out what's going on over there. Guo lets Biden or Guo lets Steve Bannon know all the dirt, all the bribery, all the sex tapes, all the corruption going on with the Biden family. And is with this upcoming election being Joe Biden being the potential president of the United States, it's kind of important information to know that if he's being paid off billions of dollars by the Chinese Communist Party, clearly that's a problem. Clearly that makes him a national security threat. Clearly, if the CCP also has blackmail tapes of his son smoking crack, doing drugs, doing illicit activity, abusing children, blah, 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 they could use that as leverage over the most powerful man in the country now. So Steve Bannon, Guo, and all these people knowing this, they go, we got to figure out as a way to deal with this. So they try to make connections in the FBI. They try to make connections in the Department of Justice, and to find out that a lot of the higher-ups, now we know, such as Comey and all these individuals, were corrupt, and they were actually covering up for a lot of this stuff. So that didn't work. So what did they do? They went to the mayor of America, Mr. Rudy Giuliani, who was well known as well for taking down a lot of the mafia when he was in mayor of New York. And he is himself is a prosecutor, personal lawyer to the president, and has prosecuted a lot of corruption in the past, politicians, whether they're Democrat or Republican. So here's the line of chain. It goes from Guo, develops the app with the Chinese guy. He makes his connection with Bannon. Bannon's the connection to Rudy Giuliani, which is basically going to be the prosecutor. Who else do we have lurking in the photo here? In the mirror, if you want to zoom in a little bit, you have a Chinese lady. Who is the Chinese lady? This Chinese lady is also exiled. She is a whistleblower who is personally, she's a Chinese virologist, and who has personally seen and knows all the details that COVID-19, the coronavirus, is nothing more than something that was fabricated and souped up and designed by the Communist China Party as a bioweapon, as a way to take down America's economy and the economy globally, and a way also to stifle quell a lot of the revolutions going on in Hong Kong and stuff like that. So, you know, Trump was destined to win 2020 because his economy was doing so well. What did he do? Every time he got up and did a rally or anytime he had any kind of media appearance, he would promote that, well, look, America, why not vote for me in 2020? Your 401ks are up, the economy's up, everything's doing great. So like the UFC fighter champion said in that viral video, if you got a coach who's winning Super Bowls, you don't go and fire that guy, even if you don't agree with the plays he's making. So they knew Trump was going to win. There was no way. Biden was a weak candidate. So what did they do? The Chinese Communist Party let this virus out. Why would they do that? Well, they don't care about their own people. And we now know by earlier reports that when the virus leaked out of their own country, they locked their country down heavily. Nobody was traveling, nothing like that. The only thing that they didn't lock down was travel outside their country. So flights were still coming out of Wuhan. People were leaving the country. So you couldn't move from one city to one city in China during the outbreak, but you could take a flight and go fly to America. They allowed this to happen. And at the same time, they're also telling Fauci and all the other individuals, no, it's not really transmittable. Yeah, it's not that big of a deal for the first couple months. This is why also in the media, if you go back and look at the old clips, for the first couple months, Fauci and all of them are saying, don't really worry about it. Don't worry about it. Even Trump, to his discredit, was saying, oh, Xi says they got it handled. They're doing a good job. Don't worry about it. This gave the couple months for the virus to get out and spread. Then once it got out and spread, and it's already the damage has been done, now you see the World Health Organization and Fauci and Bill Gates and all them flip-flopping saying, whoa, this is a pandemic. This is horrible. Oh, my God, we got to shut everything down, shut the economy down, lock her all down. We're going to get an influx in the hospitals. We're going to have millions of people die. So this was used as a biological weapon, and because everything got locked down, the economy got shut down. So now Trump couldn't go to his rallies and say, hey, guys, look how great your 401k is doing. Look how great the economy, look how great I'm doing, because the virus wiped all that potential and all that prosperity out overnight. So now they have a good way of actually using that against Trump and maybe give Biden a better chance to win now. So let me go back and read again because I got it pulled up here. This program, the blue, gold, yellow. So in English, B stands for the color blue, indicating control of the internet. G stands for gold, pointing to buying influence through payoffs. And yellow is the plan to assert control over key people through sex and seduction. Part of the master strategy includes influences media giants to promote Chinese messaging, something that President Trump points out recently. So you also see why in the NFL and all these other sports agencies also in Hollywood always cuck to the CCP and promote China. So back to the connections. So you have Steve Bannon, you have the virologist, you have all of them now, and they're trying to get this information out. They finally now in the last week have started to release this information. They couldn't wait anymore. They tried to go to the FBI, they tried to go to the DOJ, they tried to get it out, and it just kept getting suppressed. So last night on the website, gtv.org, which you guys proceed with caution if you go view it, you can see for yourself all the stuff has been leaked. Sex tapes of Hunter Biden. And here's the crazy part about it. In these tapes and in a lot of these photos, we can see Hunter Biden is actually doing stuff with his deceased brother's wife, the widow, and also her daughter. So that would be what, his first cousin, or like you can see he's also doing stuff. There's a picture that I've personally viewed. It looks like Obama's daughter, which is disturbing. And other high up Chinese women as well. So the Chinese Communist Party had all this dirt. They had all of it. They were sitting on it. Our FBI, DOJ, and all the Justice Department, they knew about it as well. So they had these sex tapes. They had Hunter Biden clearly abusing women underage, even his own family members, and they didn't do anything about it. That should scare every single individual that's that corrupt. Now, Dad, do you want it for yourself? Obviously, you can't show it on the screen, but do you for yourself just want to type in gtv.org and we can just watch your facial expressions of the website? gtv.org. So we can let everyone know. You can see yourself as I'm breaking this stuff for everyone. I'm not blowing smoke up anyone's ASS here. This is real information.
Okay, hold on here. What we got? It's like a YouTube kind of a thing.
He created this website. It's kind of like a Twitter. They have a Twitter feed, and it's called Gutter, I think. So you can upload videos to this. They also have a feed section. So it just scroll down through it on the main site, and you'll see probably some of the stuff. Don't show it. No, go off it. Turn it off. I wouldn't show that.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, shoot. Yeah, actually, I never noticed there. Yeah, there's some crazy
hopefully
stuff here.
Well, most of what you showed, it was blurred and you didn't see too much, but everyone just got a nice little surprise. So we're not joking, folks. When people get on CNN and when people get on the news and say this is fake news, it's a conspiracy theory, I've seen it with my own eyes. A lot of people else have seen it with their own eyes. You can see it for your own eyes. Ain't a conspiracy theory. Hunter Biden is a pedophile who abuses his own family members. He has in text message and email told his father about the abuse, and his father did nothing about it. And this is, you got Joe Biden who's running to be the president of the United States. We want to know his moral character. Who is he as a man? And who he is as a man is he takes his son who has a drug problem, and he basically hands him over to the Chinese as a bag man to collect money for him as the middleman, and knowing that he's going to be abused by the Chinese by giving a bunch of drugs to feed his drug habit. So this is the father that Joe Biden is. He allows his kids to run amok and abuse their own family members sexually. He allows his kids to smoke crack cocaine while he himself writes the crime bill that makes crack cocaine in rock form get life in prison or 10 years in prison in some cases versus cocaine, crack in powder form. So here he is putting black people away and a bunch of people away for smoking crack for 10, 15 years, and his own son is sitting at home smoking on the crack pipe. This is the man. This is the moral character you want to run the most powerful country in the world. I don't think so. He's a national security threat. He would never get any kind of class clearance if he actually had to apply for it right now. No friggin' agency would ever hire this guy because he's got so much dirt and he's getting paid by the CCP. So this is what's breaking, you guys. It's very, very, very important information. It's gonna. And what was massively shocking to see is you seen Rudy Giuliani, the Borat story, you know, the still frame, the shot of him with his hand down his pants. You know, that went viral. Social media's promoted that. Twitter promoted it. I just opened my Twitter app and I could see it like crazy, always in my Twitter feed. Last night, I also watched the Borat film. And guess what? I watched it in its full context. They have basically an audio issue. They bring Rudy to the bedroom to fix the audio issue. You can see earlier in the scene the female, and while this is happening, Rudy knows the girl's 24 years old. So they portray it to the media that, Rudy thought she was 15. No. Earlier in the scene, they're smoking or they're drinking a whiskey shot or something together. He knows she's of age to drink. So don't get that wrong. So Rudy goes off into the room. The female tells him to sit on the bed. You can literally see her pulling up his shirt and getting his microphone out of his pants because they're done the interview now. So what's he do? He rolls back on the bed and he tucks his shirt back in because she just pulled it up to pull out his audio equipment. Well, what do? They have the hidden candid camera to take a still shot when he's literally tucking his shirt and it looks like he's touching his wiener. So that goes viral on social media. That gets promoted as Rudy Giuliani is trying to put the moves on in a hotel room on who he thinks is a 15-year-old reporter. That's promoted. That's not fake news. That's not censored. Now, my father just for a split second showed you some blurry, grainy images that you can go see, not grained, of Hunter Biden actually abusing his family members, seeing his own wiener pics and all that kind of crap. And that you can't find on Twitter. Why? Why? Because that's too damning. And this whole thing is, I think, red-pilled everyone that social media is in the bag of the CCP, is in the side of the Democratic Party, is in the pockets of all those individuals. And I now myself am thinking, what dirt do they have? What compromising material do they have on Jack Dorsey and some of these individuals running these social media platforms? Because why is it that a still frame of Rudy Giuliani sticking his hand down his pants goes viral on social media, and Hunter Biden, whose father's about to run to be the president of the United States, whose video of him abusing his niece and his family member stuff, that doesn't go viral. That gets censored. That gets people destroyed. Last night, there was a nuclear button pushed on accounts all over the Twitter sphere. Vast majority of the people I subscribe to nowadays have all been banned on social medias. You got to think. It started with Alex Jones. Then it was, Stefan Molyneux, Milo Yiannopoulos, Gavin McKenna's. We had these guys last night. Guo Yangming, his guy, Rudy Giuliani. You had the National Post break the story, not even of the sexual stuff, just on the Hunter Biden email exchanges showing, hey, do you want me to send that money over to you? Yeah, we're gonna still gonna be corrupt together. Like basically almost spelling out his insider deals he's doing with the CCP, and all that stuff gets censored on social media. So there's clearly a bias. There's clearly favoritism being played out here in the media sphere. And a lot of this information I've had to dig real deep for because, like I said, you're not going to find it on the social media platforms today. And that should make everyone wonder, why do they allow certain fake news? Why did they allow the Russia story to go for 3 years, played out on every major mainstream media source that Trump's working with Russia? Then his own FBI investigates him and finds, oh, no, he's not working with Russia. But that's allowed for 3 years. But Trump comes out and say, hey, we have physical proof of Hunter Biden taking money from the Chinese, from Ukraine, and all these other corrupt dictators, and that's censored. So people need to wake up to this information, and hopefully this video actually even gets seen. So now that you're looking through some of the website, Dad, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I'm not looking through the website anymore. That's but I did while you were talking because you brought up Stefan Molyneux, and I thought that was really something that I wanted to actually bring up because you mentioned his name. I'm not sure. Did you check out that video regarding an urgent message from? Actually, I think we talked about it. That I'm going to show a link to folks here because this is something that not only is frustrating for people like Stefan Molyneux, but it's frustrating for people like myself as well. Oh, wait, no, I'm clicking on the wrong one here. And I just wanted to show for you folks if you wanted to go check that out. Okay, here it is. So this is, like I say, if you go on BitChute, because obviously Stefan Molyneux has been kicked off and booted from YouTube, which obviously makes no sense other than the fact that he dares to challenge, the orthodoxy of the day, right? He practiced wrong think or wrong speak. So that's the major issue anyone has today, getting deplatformed or silenced.
I wouldn't play the video if that's what you plan on doing. Just get this video banned.
No. I'm not going to play it, but I'm just showing the folks here. So if you go to BitChute and you type in the search bar Stefan Molyneux, you'll be able to click on his channel that he has on there. Then, as you see, once you click on his channel, you'll see as you scroll down the video titled "An Urgent Message from Stefan Molyneux." And basically, I'll just kind of give you a short synopsis, a rundown of what he's saying. Basically, he's suggesting he sets up a scenario. He's really good at using metaphors, right, to kind of get you to think critically about things. And he uses the metaphor of, you imagine if you met this really like hot chick or someone that you're really interested in. She has all the attributes and traits that you would find positive and that you would want in this girlfriend or a potential future wife. Right? And it turns out she ends up moving, but she only moves one house over. And yet somehow the relationship starts to break down because you, as the person who's pursuing and have had a prior relationship with this person that you deemed as just so amazing and everything you had expected or hoped for in a woman, but because she moved over, could you imagine the scenario of you just stop even bothering trying to pursue this person that you see as being so great, so beneficial to your life, because of the person moving one house over? Well, that would sound ridiculous. Anyone thinking about that would be like, well, why would the fact that she moved one house over, why would that prevent you from pursuing her further if she does everything and is the epitome of what you would deem as worthy, or the type of person that you would want to have an active or involved relationship with? Well, it's the same line, and I basically used that kind of line of reasoning and thought process myself in terms of, well, when people say, oh, I haven't been getting the notifications, right? Now, I haven't been kicked off YouTube yet, but I do, like I say, it's kind of along the lines, oh, I haven't seen your videos, man. It's like, oh, really? What, did you forget how to type in Canadian Libertarian in YouTube? Because they're all right there. That's all you have to do. If notifications aren't working, if YouTube is failing to notify you of my new video uploads or my live streams, well, hey, all you got to do is type in Canadian Libertarian. Or in terms of Stefan Molyneux, you might not be able to find his videos anymore on YouTube because YouTube, once again, has silenced and suppressed the man and prevented him from having a channel on YouTube any longer. But yeah, he's just one house over or one website over, right? BitChute, or hey, if you don't want to go on BitChute, Parler, Minds. I mean, there's a multitude. That's the thing. It's not even the fact that he's on it just moved just one house over or one website over. He's actually got his own website too, freedomain.com, right? So there's all kinds of ways for people to find the material. But this is the problem we're seeing today. And I'm still trying to figure out why it is that those of us who've been here all along for a long time now, and Stefan Molyneux has definitely been at the forefront of this stuff and trying to promote the philosophy of liberty and trying to explain to people the importance of respecting and fighting for liberty. And people like myself have been trying to do that and travel along that same journey and trying to reach out to people. And what we're seeing today, like I say, I don't know. Yes, YouTube's, these social media platforms definitely suppress us and they definitely attempt to silence us. This we know for certain. But once again, it's just like blaming the politicians or the media class for all that they're doing. Yeah, they're definitely at fault. But what about the people, right? What about the masses that are willing to fall for that bullshit or to regurgitate their nonsense? Are we not to hold any of these people to account and personally responsible as well? Because that's the thing. Even myself, I'm more than willing to place the burden, or at least a large percentage of the burden and all that's wrong with this world today on the political and the ruling class. But once again, it's up to the people, the masses, to push back against that and show that, no, we're not going to fall in line for this nonsense. We want you to hold power to account. And if you're unwilling to do so, well, we'll support those who are. But that's where we're seeing the failure, or where the breakdown is actually taking place. Is those of us who have been out in the forefront and trying to do these things and help educate and inform the people. Well, apparently, like I say, whether it's because of suppression or the social media platforms or the hacks in the establishment media or the political class or the educators, there's lots of people who are trying to manipulate people's minds and prevent them from getting this information. But once again, if you're allowing them to manipulate you so that you're not willing to engage or support the people who are properly trying to inform you, then you are at fault as well. So let's at the very first, before we go on any further, let's just stop fucking blaming everyone else, because that's an issue it's one of those things that's been really grinding on my gears for a long fucking time, is trying to always point out, well, it's these people's fault. Well, no, it's all of our fault, or at least not mine or Matt's, or maybe not those of you who are watching this particular stream, because you're actually showing that you are proactive and want to be properly informed. But think about the millions of our fellow citizens in our countries who aren't. And those are the people, once again, it's very difficult for us to be able to do what we're trying to do, which is to bring about more freedom and liberty for every individual. And it's really hard to do that if people aren't willing to pay attention to what we have to say and willing to push back against this stuff. And you know what? They could try to silence and suppress us, but they can only do that if you allow them to do so. If you would follow people like Stefan Molyneux over to their other platforms, well, they can't silence you. Facebook or YouTube or Twitter can kick them off the platforms, but there's all kinds of other platforms out there, folks. So it's really, really important that you start standing up and supporting. Once again, I don't know what has happened, why people that seem to have fallen by the wayside, but once again, it's vitally important for you to start showing real support. And showing, not just for us, once again, it's not just a popularity game, but what it is it shows that we are a force to be reckoned with. But at present, the ruling class, the political class, the media class, they're like, well, we don't have much to be concerned from people like Bennett or Matthew or Stephen Molyneux, because no one's really paying attention to them anyways. We are the ones now have taken up the center stage and have the spotlight focused on us. And we're the ones now that have the ability to manipulate the people's minds. But hey, once again, if the people are willing to allow that to take place, well, that's their own fault. But the other obviously issue with that is we have to suffer as a consequence of their willingness to allow that to happen. But anyways, that was just my little rant, because it really does grind my gears that the people who have been out there fighting for these things and you know, trying to enlighten the minds of the masses are now being pushed by the wayside and not really having their message resonate or even being heard by a lot of people. But anyways, back to what you were covering there, Matt.
Yeah, for sure. I think now finally the old fogies, you know, the Trump's team and stuff like that, the people in the news are finally realizing that, oh yeah, media censorship is a big issue, and they don't realize that, yeah, like even when you type in Google, or even the fact of Google, you got to realize Google is just indexing the internet and giving you what they think you want to see for search and relevancy. But if they suppress that stuff and you search something in Google and they don't give you the link to it, it doesn't exist. You know, that's the censoring. Or you know, when you autofill, you start writing in a word and it starts already going to spell it out for you. Well, if you start typing in, like, let's say AL to say Alex Jones, it won't even autofill, versus, you know, you start typing in some other celebrity, it'll autofill easily. And the censorship is definitely, people need to get to these other platforms, because that all this stuff's going to be banned and you're not going to be able to find it anyway. And we're already seeing it now. But back to the Biden stuff. So the New York Post busts the story, right? So as I said, it went through the chain. You got Guai, and you got these other Chinese dissidents. They have this information. They have, you know, the dirt on the Hunter Biden, and they have the hard drives. They have access to the stuff. Blah 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 blah. They come over here. They try to make connections in the media to America. So, like I said, it gets through to Steve Bannon, who then passes it up the chain to Rudy Giuliani. So now they have this information. So now Steve and Rudy, they're like, how do we get this out to the masses? They first try to approach the mainstream media. New York Times, New York Post, Washington Times, CNN, Fox News. So this is also a shame to you, Fox News, who thinks that, oh, Fox News is all about Trump. Fox News loves Trump. They had this information too, and they didn't run it. So out of all the news sources on all of America, the New York Post was the only one who actually had the balls to publish this story. So good on the New York Post. And if there's one thing about the New York Post, is it's owned by Rupert Murdoch. Now, Rupert Murdoch, I just Googled it, is worth roughly, as of July, about $6.5 billion. And unlike the social medias, if you go and post this story like my father's showing you right now, and the information is
This is a
inaccurate,
new update.
this is a new update.
Yeah, it's post reports on Hunter Biden emails thrive despite online blackouts, because that's
Well, it
the
had
thing.
the Streisand effect, yeah.
Yeah.
So you like as you're looking through the New York Post, these articles, if they post stuff, like if they try and say literally the vice president's son is guilty of abusing children and taking money from China, that's slander. That's defamation. If that information is not correct, then the Biden family could easily sue the New York Post. And like I just read to you, Rupert Murdoch is worth $6.5 billion. You think this guy's running this New York Post and he's just thinking that, oh, I'm just going to post this defamatory thing about the Bidens and say that they're pedophiles and they take money from China? He's not going to post that. He's not going to put his $6 billion on the table and risk being sued for defamation. So clearly this information was vetted. We know it's vetted. So here's what's crazy. So CNN, Washington Post, all these other New York Times, they can run for 3 years the story about Trump colluding with Russia with no evidence at all. They didn't try to wait and vet that stuff. But then all of a sudden, this one damning story comes out on the New York Post about these emails, and that gets censored. It gets censored so bad, which I'm going to move to my next topic, which is they actually blocked and took down the New York Post Twitter. They blocked them out of it. And they said to the New York Post, hey, we'll let you back into your Twitter if you take down the article. They literally held them hostage. So I think still now we're like a week or two into this thing, and the Washington Post still doesn't have their Twitter back because they're still locked out of it for publishing this post. So, wow, this is insane, the censorship. So, as my father just said, you better get on Gab, you better get on Parler, you better find BitChute, you better start going to websites by their direct URLs, because all this stuff is being taken down and censored. And why is that? You got to always ask, what's the motivation? Exactly. Why is Russia collusion disproven now? No evidence. That's suppressed, or that's promoted on trending on Twitter. Rudy Giuliani, with his hands down his pants, promoted trending on Twitter. But all this stuff about Hunter Biden and those families are all suppressed. So you got to realize that there's firewalls up on the internet. And this is what I want to get to and segue off into China and all these other third world countries. They don't get to see the same information that we do. And one thing as us freedom fighters, like even me and myself and my father, we got to take this responsibility upon ourselves is, we're speaking English right now, Dad, but a lot of people around the globe don't speak in English and don't easily watch this video. And we don't have subtitles on this. You can't go on YouTube and click on the thing and add subtitles. So there's people right now in Iraq, Iran, China, Taiwan that can't watch this information. One, because there's a firewall in their country, and literally their Google's like not even like our Google. Most of the information they don't get. Or if you're in China, you don't even get Facebook, you don't get YouTube, you don't get any of these other websites because they literally have a firewall built into the country that doesn't allow this information to get out. So, let's say these Chinese people, though, or Taiwan or Iraq or Iran or any of these places around the globe finally get through the firewall. They get a VPN, they use Tor browsers, they use this stuff, and they finally stumble upon mine and my dad's video. It's still no good because unless we have it in Mandarin or subtitles, they don't understand what the hell we're saying. So us as freedom fighters, we have to work very hard right now. This is my call for what we need to focus on in the next 6 months to a year is using our technology in the first world, like me and my father right now, to go and translate this stuff. And whether we actually write it in for word for you guys to read in Mandarin on the screen, or get other people to listen to it for an hour and then say it in Mandarin and kind of speak over it in audio form. But we have to get this information out to the masses. Majority of people here in America, like we're all like, wow, this is crazy, Hunter. Most of the globe doesn't know this stuff. Massive censorship. You think the censorship is bad here in America? It's crazy enough when you see the President Trump can't post and gets flagged as false information, or the New York Post is blocked out of their Twitter. If you think it's bad in America, where we enjoyed quite a bit of freedom, same with Canada, we enjoyed quite a bit of freedoms, you could just imagine how bad the censorship and suppressive information is in some of these third world countries. So we have to break through the firewalls. We have to use our technologies to get the information out. We have to do it in multiple different languages. Good thing about Jordan Peterson, his book, that he wrote it the last couple of years. He at least released it in multiple different languages. And that's what we need to start doing. We need to start getting the information not only out to English-speaking people. I think we're naive to think that the whole globe knows English. And then another last part I want to talk, and then I'll hand over to my father, is anytime I'm out in public, I try to talk to people about this stuff. Anytime I talk to someone who's maybe not political, I try to get this information out. And I had an incident that happened to me yesterday where I was talking to someone, and I was trying to show them the Hunter Biden emails. I was trying to actually show them the sex tape because they come in and they're like, oh, they're talking about the Rudy Giuliani thing. And I was like, well, if you think that's crazy, let me show you something that's really crazy. And I start showing this individual the stuff, and, they go, well, you know what, I'm not really interested in American politics that much, so, I don't really want to see that stuff. And this is my message to all you people watching the video, but most people watching this video probably doesn't resonate with this message, because if you're watching the video, you're clearly into some kind of news. But you cannot be into politics all you want, but politics is into you. So all these people out there ignorant thinking, well, I don't want to listen to this information. I don't want to tune into this. You guys talk about depressing stuff. Who wants to know about pedophilia? Who wants to hear about how the government's screwing and spying on people? And we don't want to. This is depressing. I'm not into politics. I just want to enjoy my life. I want to go fishing. I want to, play with my kids in the yard. I just want to go to work and chill and watch TV. That's fine. You can do that, but at your own apparel. We're to the point now where you can tune out politics, but politics dictates how much money comes out of your paycheck. Politics dictates the health care that you get. Politics dictates the education that your kids are going to be raised under. Politics dictates whether you have the basic freedoms, whether you have due process, whether you're going to be running a capitalist society versus a communist society. Politics is the differential between breadlines and communism and being shot in the back of your head and black bag with no due process, if you're in communist China or North Korea. So people are like, oh, I'm not into politics. I felt like saying to this dude at the time. I didn't, because I just had to walk away because I was getting, one thing I got to work on is being able to keep my cool better to be able to get the messaging to these people. But in that moment, I was so upset because what he says that to me, what I take is when people say, well, I don't care about politics. That's like, you don't care about kids being raped. You don't care about the society going to shit. You don't care about people unemployed right now. You don't care about starvation numbers going up through. So you don't care about anything. You have no morals. You have no backbone. You have no basic instinct of survival to want to leave the world a better place for your children. When people say that stuff, that's how I take it. That's why I got so upset I had to leave the room, because it's like, wow, you might as well said, I don't care that my neighbor's raping someone in his backyard. I don't care. What do you mean you don't care, dude? If you don't care, there's something wrong with you. So when me and my father get up and do these videos, and this morning wake up, and get prepared, do our research. I barely had any sleep last night because I've been breaking all this and trying to research the hell out of it. You think I want to see Hunter Biden's wiener? You think I want to look through this information? I do it because it's a duty. If you knew your next door neighbor was right now raping and abusing someone, it's your duty to walk over there and do something about it. And if the police aren't going to do anything about it, then you got to go deal with your neighbor doing that awful act. And I'm looking around right now, and I'm not seeing the FBI. I'm not seeing the police. I'm not seeing all these sheeple. I'm not seeing CNN talk about all these information. Basically that, not my neighbors raping someone in the backyard right now. Hunter Biden's basically raping someone, his own family members. We can see the videos now. And nobody's doing anything about it. And you really are not going to stand up for children? Like, I thought this would have been the thing that united us right before the election. If there's one message that can unite the Democrats and the Republicans and the left, the rights, the libertarians, and the government bootlickers, it should be we should all basically say, hey, it's not okay to rape kids. It's not okay to beat kids. It's not okay to abuse kids. If we can't unify around saving children and not abusing children, we are lost. We've lost our moral backbone in the world. And the thing is, when you get to these hot pressed issues where, for me, the idea of not saving a child who's being abused literally gets me enraged, and I want to go over there and hurt someone that's doing stuff like that to children, versus someone who's like, I don't really care. That's going to lead to civil war territory. Because if I'm so passionate about saving children and someone's not passionate about saving children and they're in the way of me saving that children, it's not gonna end well for people. And this is not a threat. This is even basic mainstream news sources you can Google. Are we headed toward a civil war? Are we headed toward a civil war? Like, this is literally being printed in mainstream news sources. Even CBC and even things like that are covering, America could get really dangerous this election. And yeah, people, that's where we're at. So you want to ignore politics, it's fine, but you're not going to ignore politics when it's at your door and it's too late. So you better tune into it now. You better start speaking out.
Oh yeah, I don't care for that. That's the thing. And I will even admit that I kind of fall on both sides of that coin when I'm thinking about it intensely, because I just like you, I can't stand when people say, oh, I don't pay attention to politics, because that old expression, well, you can avoid politics, but politics won't avoid you. That's absolutely true. And it's something that resonates with me, because most of my 20s and probably early 30s, I didn't pay attention to politics either. But obviously later on in my life, that politics caught up to me and affected my life dramatically, right? If I had been maybe out front and preemptive and standing in defense of those freedoms that I was taking advantage of, maybe earlier on in my life, and maybe of other people as well, because that's the other thing. We all get overwhelmed and thinking, well, what can I do? But once again, as I've said in the past, one person can do a tremendous a lot. In particular, if you have the right tools at your disposal, you're an intelligent person, and you actually have some evidence to bring to light as well. Because as we know, Edward Snowden was one man, but he definitely helped bring a lot of truth to the table. But yeah, the whole pretense that you're going to avoid politics, all it does is give the opponents, or those who do want to be actively engaged and involved with politics, the leg up. Because while you're not paying attention, or while you've turned your gaze away, well, what they're doing behind the scenes or behind your back, well, yeah, like I say, it turned out, for me in particular, it turned out that, yeah, they've created this era now where you can just charge people criminally, like people like myself, and destroy their entire lives and livelihood based on nothing more than the what if scenario. Oh, you may have done something. And it's the same thing that we're seeing taking place under COVID now, where the people are starting to experience restrictions, lockdowns, fines. Heck, even some people are being placed in quarantine camps or isolation centers in different places around the world. And once again, I'm sure a lot of those people might have been thinking prior to that, well, hey, we wouldn't have to worry about that stuff in the West. Well, here it is. And now it's a little too late, right? Although I guess it's never really ultimately too late to start fighting for your freedom. But you're at least getting to the point where a lot of people are realizing that, yeah, maybe we should have been thinking about fighting about this kind of stuff long before now. Because even if you think about something like a civil war, once society breaks down to the point where you are actually experiencing a civil war, yeah, that is definitely a little bit too late. Now, you're going to have to scramble and do something, because you can't just sit back and rest on your laurels or sit on your ass at that point in time. But trust me, your potential for a lot more grave harm is much, much higher once you've already gotten into the civil conflicts. Whereas people like myself, Matt, people like Stephen Molyneux and others have been trying to get in front and say, let's do the right thing now before we get to that point where, yeah, you literally have to go through a long, protracted period of social and economic unrest and civil conflict to try to, weed out things and get back to something remotely resembling a normal life once again. And the problem I have always suggested is, I've basically spent a decade now. So a decade of my life. Now, I won't say it's completely wasted, because I think it's been beneficial in some areas, in some regards, but I don't want to spend another 10 years, talking about ripping off the Band-Aid. At some point in time, we really do got to get to the point where we're ripping off the Band-Aid. Like, we can't just kick this fucking proverbial can down the road forever. It has to take place. There has to be some precedent. Otherwise, the ruling class, they're just going to continue to run rickshot over us, because we're showing that we have the unwillingness, or we're unwilling to stand in defense of our freedoms. And you can't avoid the politics anymore, because the politics is front and center. It's omnipresent and all around you. Now, I just want to deal with because this kind of associates or aligns with this kind of line of thinking anyways, because I've said this in the past, this constant reiteration and use of the term experts. My God, that's driving me nuts. And that's how the media is keeping people confused and confounded and listening to the wrong goddamn people. And it's all this pretense, and you hear the media and the political class constantly referring to the people who want to repeat and advocate their political talking points as experts and referring to anyone that counters them or challenges them as what? Far rightist, fringe movement, populist. I mean, you've heard of all the negative stereotypes or connotation used towards people that want to challenge this political orthodoxy that they're trying to jam down our throat. But even this law professor, or not law professor, but like I say, let me bring this up. I'll share the screen. Now, I'm surprised, like I say, but not fully, but like I've said before in the past, when it comes to, if you want to get any decent programming from CBC, the only place for the most part you're going to get that is on CBC radio. And in this particular example, I was not disappointed once again. So you'll check this out, or if you do check this out, I'm going to read a little bit for you, but I definitely suggest that you listen to the entire audio version of this. It's 27 minutes and 45 seconds long. But like I say, I'll just give you a little breakdown, a little rundown. So it's come from the radio program called Spark. Think for yourself. How to judge expertise in a time of conflicting opinions. New book urges people to critically assess what they read, see, and hear. So this was June 12th, 2020 was when this was actually posted, and then it was last updated October 16th. So they re-air these kind of things periodically on CBC radio. So as it suggested here, it was originally published June 14th. Do you regularly outsource your thinking? So this is Vikram Manchuramani, is a Harvard University lecturer and the author of the book, Think for Yourself, Restoring Common Sense in an Age of Experts and Artificial Intelligence. And like I say, this is a really, really important program that I definitely recommend that you listen to. I'm going to get down here a little bit further because there's a couple points that I think was really important that this gentleman was bringing out. So as you point out, behavioral economics suggests that humans are far from these hyper-rational maximizers of benefits. We can be irrational. We can be not very good, for example, at weighing probability. So should we really be that ready to trust ourselves? Sure. So I guess what I'm getting now, this is that lecturer that's answering the question from the CBC personality. So I guess what I'm getting at is not only a trust factor in terms of trusting ourselves, but more importantly, just being mindful of that. The fact that you yourself in this question asked whether you should trust yourself indicates a mindfulness about whether you should or shouldn't. That is far better and more appropriate than those who blindly, without thinking about it, go forth. That is my main point here, which is we need to think about how we think. We need to think about the inputs we put into our thinking process. We need to mindfully manage where we focus. Okay, wait a sec here. Okay, I got to get down a little further here. Where did it go here? What point? This question is this. Okay, actually, I'm going to continue on. At one point in the book, you point out, and this is quite astonishing, that experts in general, no, this is actually exactly where I wanted to get to. So yeah, the experts in general are not much better than you or I in predicting outcomes, and that people with deep specialization can be even worse than non-experts at prediction. So why does this happen? What is going on there? Now listen to this, and when this person was explaining it, it makes total sense and definitely resonated with me in how I've perceived life and how I've thought about things. Because once again, as a non-expert in a particular field myself, it does give me the ability to think more from a macro perspective. Whereas the expert, what are you doing as an expert but focusing? And if you're focusing on something, think about it. If you're really, really doubling down on your focus in a particular field or a particular area, well, that means you're blurring or obscuring every other aspect. See, that's the thing. Focus sounds good in theory, but only like tunnel vision. You can focus on one small area, one small aspect with tunnel vision as well. But there's a whole lot more to the picture if you step back or you're not looking through that kind of tunnel vision. So listen to what this gentleman had to say. Like I say, this is a professor, a lecturer at one of the most prestigious universities, on the planet, who's pushing back and challenging some of people. And this guy would be obviously considered an expert as well, but he's at least privy and mindful enough to point out the fact that, yeah, the experts, yeah, maybe not necessarily those are the people you have to put full faith and trust in. Not to suggest that you shouldn't listen to any experts. But anyways, let me just let you hear what this person said in his own words. So in terms of navigating uncertainty and thinking through complex, dynamic, forward-looking scenarios where we don't have a known probability set, etc., which what we're talking about today when you're talking about COVID, there is nothing. It's all speculative at this point. There is no evidence yet to give anyone in the healthcare field or epidemiologists or any of these people in vaccines. There is no evidence. There isn't anything clear and concise or factually derived where they could say it's this and that's, and there's no way to think outside that. There is nothing yet. No precedent has been set, right? This is still very early on, and that's what this person is pointing out. Environments like that are particularly dangerous for expert predictions. And that's the other thing. When you're talking about predictions, you're trying to suggest that you know what's going to happen in the future, which, I mean, how many models have we seen, right? These expert models or the modeling used to COVID is going to, unfold, the potential for the death counts, which we've seen so much. The actual reality was so much less severe in terms of like deaths or all that than was the originally modeled or predicted. And this is just, once again, showing more evidence that these predictions or these experts can be proven to be massively wrong and incorrect. And once again, it's our lives, it's our bottom line, it's our livelihoods that are affected by these so-called experts in the predictions. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But generally, it comes from the belief that was formed around some significant research conducted by Philip Tetlock, who was a professor who studied expert decisions and expert predictions over a long period of time. And he found that the more focused the expert, the less likely their prediction would be successful. And in fact, those outside the area of expertise were more successful at predicting. So I guess that's really a little bit of what I'm getting at when I say that experts are perhaps not best to rely upon in times where there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of dynamism. So think about that, folks. Now, like I say, I'll make sure that we put a link to this in the description of the stream as well. And like I say, I definitely recommend you listen to it all. But this is a person at the highest upper echelons of Ivy League education institutions that's world-renowned. Everyone knows about Harvard, right? And this is someone that would be probably deemed an expert himself that's saying, listen, based on our own studies and our own past modeling and the evidence, and once again, even just the anecdotal evidence so far in terms of the prediction in terms of COVID-19 and how that was going to unfold across the world. Like I say, we've seen, or hey, how about the outcomes of elections, right? I mean, how many times have we heard these experts get things completely wrong? Now, when people are constantly being proven to be wrong or that their expertise does not give them any magical power or crystal ball like abilities to predict the future, the fact that people are allowing these experts today or these healthcare professionals to come in and to act now as our basically arbiters of truth or rulers rather than the political class. Now it's these healthcare experts are taking up that role and saying, hey, just listen to what we got to say. But how many times, once again, have we seen that they've been proven wrong? And how many other areas of our life have shown to be detrimentally worse than even if they were correct? Because that's the thing, even though they've been proven to be wrong, even if their models or their predictions were correct, it does not circumvent or change the fact that there are all kinds of unintended or intended consequences of these lockdowns, these restrictions, these mask mandates, or the potential for forced vaccines, where you're now having entire large segments of the society no longer trusting people in the healthcare field. That's going to have long-reaching ramifications and consequences going forward. And then we've heard how many people there are suffering from mental stress and anguish. Where I was just reading an article earlier. Let me see if I make sure if I've got that pulled up there now. This is out of Politico. CDC, 1/4 of young adults contemplated suicide during pandemic. So think about it. Like I say, there's so many other areas that this effect is having on us. And it's not just the economic, but the social implications as well. And like I say, to believe that these experts have the ability to predict the outcomes or the future. Once again, this person is pointing out the fact that it's not true. You need to stop listening to these fucking idiots in the media that constantly fucking roll out these experts and make it so that you are supposed to listen to what they got to say. You're supposed to forget what you think yourself. They're telling you not to be investigative or not to do other research. They're basically saying, no, you just listen to what we've got to say. But as we've seen time and time again through all of history, and that's being reiterated again today in that article by that gentleman from Harvard, is stop trusting these people that are so-called experts. Start to think more critically. Start to think for yourself. And if you do that, then you'll get to the same place, the same position that people like me and Matt are in, and realize that, no, we've been duped, we've been sold a bill of goods, and we've been lied to and deceived. And it's having massive social and economic consequences and ramifications, not just today, but it's going to have a lot of ramifications and on the mental health of not just young people, but old going forward. So let's start to think critically about issues at the very least and stop allowing these so-called experts to dominate your thought processes or what roams around in your mind. Anyways, I just wanted to bring that up because I think that's another really, really, really important thing is for people to start critically thinking about the issues that are surrounding them. Like I say, whether you're talking about COVID-19, whether you're talking about politics, whether you're talking about foreign conflicts, whether you're talking about pedophilia, whatever topic of discussion or area of discussion that you're actively involved or engaged with, yes, you need to start thinking critically. And if you get involved with someone like Matt was saying earlier, with someone that doesn't want to do that, then yeah, of course, try your best to get them or lead them down that road. But at the same time, if they're unwilling to think critically about the issues, then just point out the fact that you are not anyone that's going to be helpful or beneficial. Matter of fact, all you're doing is contributing to more confusion and apathy, where people are like sitting on the sidelines because they don't know the difference between truth or fact from fiction. And that's really, really important. We have to be in pursuit of truth, and that means having an open mind and being willing to think critically, or even think about things that you might have not thought about in the past.
Well, that's what scares me the most, and I think what keeps me up most at night is whether it's the lockdown measures and the double standards when it comes to the ruling class, or even now you're seeing the censorship of certain opinions versus not, or you're seeing, if you jaywalk, they throw the book at you, but if you're Hunter Biden who's smoking crack and doing and abusing underage children, you don't go to jail. But if that was you as a public citizen and you had no power or fame or notoriety, oh my God, you'd be doing life in jail. So here's what scares me. So I'm seeing basically the elites, and I don't like calling them that. Let's just say the people who are, like you said, the health officials, the people making the rules, making these rules. They're basically sitting in a chair, flicking grapes in their mouth, eating, enjoying life, relaxing, and telling everyone else not to do any of what they're doing. And that creates a lot of animosity with the public. If the public gets to the point where they realize, oh, if I jaywalk, I go to jail. But if Hunter Biden rapes kids on tape and takes money in foreign investments and stuff like that, he gets get at a jail free card. That's the area where you start getting into civil war territory. When the public realizes that there's no longer justice for them, that they're ruling with an iron fist, and then the ones that are in power get off scot-free with everything, the double standard in the law, that makes people want to get, do some crazy things. And what scares me the most too is you have these people who are in power, who have had power for so long, and the public are finally waking up to the double standard in the laws, and they're starting to have those thoughts, like I said, of civil war. And here's where we need to realize the 3D chess of how the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, works. If they know that they have most of America and Canadian politicians in their pockets, then they're actually pro-civil war. Because look at it like this. If a civil war kicks off in America right now, over Hunter Biden versus the Trump supporters, Democrat versus Republican, blah, 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 whatever the situation that lights that civil war. But if at the end of the day you got Canadians killing Canadians and Americans killing Americans for differing opinions or ideologies, the CCP just sits back and look at it as, well, it's less people our military needs to engage in when we eventually go over. So, if a civil war kicked off and it was Trump supporters versus Biden supporters, and Trump supporters won and they wiped out all the Democrats, let's say they purged, millions and millions of Democrats in that civil war, That's millions and millions of Democrats that now the CCP don't got to worry about, because they would rather engage at least in the Trump supporters one-on-one than the Trump supporters and the Democrats, right? Then that's twice the enemy. So that's why the CCP and these foreign agents, they don't even care if it goes the civil war route. So CCP will create as much dysfunction and chaos in American elections and all these other things, because they don't care. Even if at the end of the day it results in civil war, nobody's attacking them in their own country, then they'd rather see us tear each other apart. And then also to segue off of that, so you got these people like Nancy Pelosi, Obama, Biden, all these compromised people now, and they're all now, I'm scared because they're put in a corner. They have only two options right now. One is, I think the Pandora's box has been opened. You're not putting the genie back in the bottle. People now are waking up at how compromised they are. We're seeing sex tapes. We're seeing the nasty compromised material. We're seeing the financial illegal activities. So Nancy Pelosi and Biden and all these people who have been compromised, they're in a corner and they only have the option of one, all this comes out, we're going to jail for life, or two, well, while we're going to jail for life anyway, we might as well put on a full-on suicidal approach and just try to take everything down because we're going down anyway. And I think that's the mindset of sick people. People like that are good people have a hard time justifying or understanding how evil people think. And that's kind of a flaw to us strategically. You know, a good person runs their day when they wake up in the morning to night, and they never think of like, hey, let me abuse children and try to use that as a blackmail tool. Or people could never fathom taking a woman and taking her hostage and keeping her in a torture room and torturing her physically for years and years on end. But then you go and watch these cold case files and you see, holy crap, there's people out there walking among us that are literally legit predators. They're not, we're humans, but mentally we're not, because I could never fathom beating the crap out of a kid and doing these terrible things and raping a toddler or something in a severe situation. But you can find someone in prison right now for raping a toddler. And that's, we walk around with blinders thinking, oh, I'm a good person, so I could never think this stuff could happen. And that puts us at this massive disadvantage. So you got people that are of that mindset who want to do harm to people. And the Nancy Pelosi's, the Bidens, these people who are doing these nasty things behind closed doors, you think that they're the mindset that as they're about to go to prison, potentially for life, or even potentially death sentences, that they're just going to go and be like, okay, here you go. Take us away. Put us in handcuffs. No, these people are already sick, obviously, from the actions that they commit. So even in that last death struggle, I think they'd rather take their own life, or if they had the nuke button, would literally blow the whole world up and kill everyone, because that they're so sick they'd rather that than them not exist, right? If you got a psychopath in power and he's like, I'm about to die anyway, and I can also take the planet with me, a lot of people would take that. And us good people walk around blinders. We think we could never fathom that kind of thought process, and it puts us at a disadvantage. And that's the scary part that's scaring me right now, is as Trump's team, as Biden starting to get busted, as Rudy Giuliani's moving in and he's putting pressure on the FBI to blow all this crap out the water and show all these families all the corruption in Washington and start putting the light to the stuff. These people are going to get desperate, and I worry that the stuff they're going to pull is going to be really, really, really bad. It's already been bad enough, but to the point where, yeah, they're going to push civil war, they're going to push division, they're going to, in their last-ditch effort, try any dirty tactic possible. And I think it's only going to get worse, unfortunately. Because I don't think they're the type of people that are just going to give power up easily and relinquish it and just walk away. Trump already gave them that option.
But you know what? When it comes to that stuff, and I hear you, but even more, see, I can actually understand apathy towards the Hunter Biden stuff. I can actually understand apathy towards pedophilia. I can actually understand apathy towards some of the economic fucking malfeasance and bullshit that's taking place. Why? Because people perceive, rightfully so, that that's someone else, right? That's someone else. And I understand human nature intrinsically. I understand human nature. Most people try to pretend that altruism is at the core of who they are. But no, it's self-preservation. So most people, or all people, right? I got to worry about me first and foremost. That's the way human beings function. They can pretend otherwise, but that's just the reality of how human beings function. What I don't understand is how is it that when compelled speech, so Jordan Peterson come to prominence, he was, he's a very prominent professor to begin with, fairly well known. He had a YouTube channel even before the whole C-16, Bill C-16 and compelled speech. But his rise to fame, those countless fucking venues that he was invited to with tens of thousands of people, right? To watch, who showed up at the throngs of people who watched his videos, the millions and millions of people, his world wide tour of going on not just establishment media outlets such as Channel 4 or other places, but even some of the social media platforms or people like Joe Rogan that interviewed him. All it took was the fact that he said, listen, never at one point in time in common law history, English or British common law history, has there ever been any form of compelled speech. And that's just words, compelled speech. And it was enough to embolden not just himself to stand up in defiance and say, no, I won't do it. And he even said it on screen, I won't do it. If you come to force me to do it, I won't do it. He basically put the line out there. It was like, I will not comply. I will not submit. I will not conform. And it was enough to not just rise him to more prominence, but to make him, like I say, a global superstar based on the fact that he refused compelled speech. Now, fast forward a few years later to the point where now it's not just speech, but it's all of us being compelled to muzzle up, put a fucking mask on your face, no matter if it makes sense, no matter if you're by yourself, no matter if you're indoor or outdoor. We're just hearing these constant blanket statements, and now by even fucking dipshits like Blaine Higgs, now that he's got his majority government, right? Because that corrupting power, now he's got the power to do so. Didn't have the power to do it before, but now that he does, that's the first thing he wants to do, is compel and force everyone to mask up or muzzle up. And where's the fucking... First of all, who are the rock stars? I mean, I was one of the ones very early on. One of the very few Canadians out there with a prominent presence on social media that was out there saying, when most people were just, oh yeah, let's allow fear to rule over us. I was one of those people saying, no, don't do it, folks. Don't do it. Don't do it. Protect the vulnerable, protect the elderly. But you know what? I am not going to be forced to muzzle up. I'm not going to have no injection of any vaccine against my will. I will not. I refuse to. And that's a hill I'm willing to fucking die on. Where are the rest of the Canadians? I do see a few of them out there, but that should be, I mean, if you're willing to stand up in defiance against compelled speech, well, at the very least, you should have that to the 10th degree, at least, when people are trying to force you to muzzle up or to fucking put something on your face, right? To cover up your face for large extended periods of time or your day. That should have been enough for me. That should have been the straw that broke the camel's proverbial fucking back for people to say, no, that's it. That's it. I'm not doing it. But as we're seeing, the script has been flipped. And now, if you don't comply, if you don't conform, now the media class, the experts, they're all pointing you at as, well, you want to kill grandma? And who the fuck is out there challenging that bullshit? That's the most sick, insane kind of rhetoric I've ever heard, because we've all heard now, the evidence is in. The overwhelming majority of these people who are dying from COVID-19 are people in these goddamn government long-term care facilities who, once again, government's in control. These healthcare professionals are the one in charge of these goddamn facilities, and they're the ones that are failing Canadians. You're not hearing about a rampant rise in COVID death rates because of people that went to the local grocery store or because people went out to enjoy a few drinks out on the beach somewhere, or because they got together, for Thanksgiving with more than just their immediate family. You're not hearing about that. No, the cases that you're hearing about are in these long-term care facilities where, like I say, it's government people, government control, government regulation, government. It's all in control, and they're the ones that are failing and causing most of these deaths, right? So this is the problem. Now, I just wanted to bring up, because once again, I don't just speak, about my own opinions. I always back it up with even the very hacks in the media that have to report on this reality. So let me just bring this up. So once again, here's a CBC News article. This is from the Marketplace, CBC News. 85%, folks, of Ontario nursing homes break the law repeatedly with almost no consequences, data analysts showed. Hidden camera reveals staff hitting, yelling at resident in nursing homes with offensives. Now, this was Katie Peterson, Melissa Mancini, David Common, William Wolf-Moyle. So it was a big effort, an investigation on CBC's behalf, and at least kudos to them for doing so. where they're seeing the revelations that are coming late. And of course, elder abuse. We've known about this long before, but with the COVID, we know what's needed. And that's the thing. They keep pumping up this fucking messaging about social isolations and protecting the vulnerable, but they're not doing it in these facilities. And if they can't perform those duties in these facilities, in these closed off environments, then why in the hell would they think it's going to be something that's going to take place out in the general public, when we know most people who have contacted COVID, young or old, if you're relatively in health, don't have comorbidities, your chance of getting overcoming that COVID-19 and moving on with your life is definitely very, very high. I mean, even Trump himself, this is a man actually who did have a couple of those comorbidities that may have attributed to him actually suffering much more readily than he did. But once again, he managed to get over it with some help, with some, obviously, some medical and health professionals giving him some medications or whatever. But as we're seeing, the people who are vulnerable, the ones who are truly in positions that need to be helped, they're not being properly protected. But meanwhile, the rest of us in society are being told that we have to destroy our livelihoods, our lives, muzzle up, mask up, and create our own little fucking atmosphere of conformity and slavery to these goddamn health experts. And it's going to all shake out in the long run, folks, where it's going to be proven that none of it contributed to the reduction or the elimination of COVID-19. COVID-19 is going to continue to unfold in the population because, once again, it doesn't care about your opinion or the so-called health experts. It's going to unfold. So what I think most people are starting to finally come to realize today, or at least anyone that's willing to watch people outside of the political orthodoxy or these so-called experts that are part of the establishment, is it's going to have to unfold. We're going to have to, like I say, get back to living as normal of a life as humanly possible and start showing your willingness and defiance. And I even say this to the people I work with. Now, I've only been, with the people I'm currently working with for a few short weeks, but already I'm compelled to stand in defiance. And when I see these people masking up or muzzling up, saying, maybe that's not a good idea. You're sending the wrong fucking message. You might think you're being a good person. That's the problem that I have with a lot of my fellow Canadians. They think that they're virtue signaling their goodness, like their morality, by fucking conforming to this bullshit. But in reality, what you're doing is you're placing the rest of society to be in even more susceptible to conforming themselves. You're placing people like myself in even more grave danger, because now I'm being isolated as shown to be a very, very tiny minority of people who are willing to challenge these things. And once again, if you can keep us in a very small minority, well, it's a lot easier to pick us off. And that's what's going to end up taking place if we don't have more and more people who are willing to rise up, stand in solidarity with us, and rather than standing in solidarity or conformity to the political or ruling class, to virtue signal their obedience. Stop virtue signaling your obedience. Have a little bit of rebellion, have a little bit of gumption, have a little bit of fucking courage, folks, and stand up for your goddamn inherent and inalienable rights. Please, please, please. It's very vitally important that you do so. Anyways, that's all I wanted to say there, Matt.
Yeah, and I think, well, first, before I say this, I want people to realize that what I'm about to talk about, I'm talking to the future. And a lot of things I'll talk about right now might even be considered a conspiracy theory. But just go to my Facebook feed and look back over the decades of my posts, and you'll see a lot of what I said has been vindicated and proven right. My track record is what I stand on. And I'm gonna explain it to you, Dad, some of what I think in my mind is happening in the world.
Okay.
So imagine this, people. If you had a button sitting in front of you, and if you pressed it, you instantly could maybe bring the world's population of 7 billion people down to 100 billion, maybe 100, not 7 billion, down to maybe a couple million. Now, if you did that, well, obviously the trash and the pollution and all the crap would obviously go away, because, a lot of people are gone now, vast majority, 95% or whatever the number may be, that you just murdered by pressing your magic button. And, the highways would probably be a lot easier to travel around on, less car pollution, less traffic, be a lot more resources now because, well, there's less of you. So now you got infinite resources because you got all this stuff for only a select amount of people. And most good people would never press that button because they never want to be responsible for murdering, 6.9 billion people. But what people need to realize is there's these predators that walk among us, these control freaks. There's a lot of people out there that if you pose that scenario, would easily press that button because they do believe that humans have polluted the world, have destroyed the world, are decadent and deplorable and put up with a lot of crap. And so this is the mind of an aristocrat elite who can abuse the population, tax the population, control his serfs, and get away with so much, even on film, and nobody does anything about it. So I'm trying to get you in the mindset of these rich people. A lot of what we're seeing played out is eugenics. A lot of these people are pro-eugenics. I mean, just look at China's Communist Party, the CCP. It's one-child policy that existed for a long time up until recently. In itself, that policy is eugenics. If you have 2 daughters, we kill your second daughter. Eugenics. Now, why is eugenics important? Why does it matter? Like I said, these elites, these people that are the billionaire class that run the world, they're getting to the point where technologically, they don't really need humans almost, maybe a few, but not many, because robots can do a lot of our work now. Just go and look at an automotive factory and see the factory line and all the robotics literally putting in the seats and putting in the steering wheel. It's amazing where we are at technologically speaking. So these higher ups, these billionaires, they're driving on the highway and they're sitting in traffic and they are looking around and be like, you know what? There's too many people on this earth. And what has been the whole climate change push? What has been the push in the last all the media cycles? You know, humans are bad. We destroy the earth. We kill the animals. We do all these bad things. Bad humans. So Bill Gates has even did TED Talks talking that we need to bring down the global population. So a lot of these people that are pushing these control policies and the lockdown are usually, if you look deep enough into it, pro-eugenics. Now, here's where I get off into my conspiracy theory mindset. And my father actually did a video on explaining this of a member of MP who leaked some information of where they think they want to take the country, Canada, in the next year. And why that this eugenics program is moving faster now is because Trump exposed a lot of the people running it, and they're about to go to jail for their crimes against humanity. So they ramped up the program, and they're trying to get it passed and put through now because they don't have the time to slowly roll this out. Now, just look at, I'm going to get you guys to Google another program. It's called Operation Dark Winter. Now, what is Operation Dark Winter? Operation Dark Winter was codenamed for a senior level bioterrorist attack simulation conducted in June 22nd to the 23rd in 2001. It was designed to carry out a mock version of a
Matt, you're dying. You're cutting out there, man. You were cutting out there real quick. Just yeah. So just hold on till your connection's a little better there.
I'm still
on my end. You're still frozen on my end. Oh, just wait. Your face turned now, so the picture that I'm seeing is different, but you're still like, you know, that kind of robot-y, echoey sound, whatever. Just one sec here. What's going on? Just barely. Wonder what's going on. Hello? You're actually getting.
I'm gonna reset my camera. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right. Okay. So while he's just resetting that, yeah. Oh, Cabal Killer. I'll just mention, yeah, just like I typed down there, because I had to go to Miramichi. Well, Fredericton, the lineup was just way too long. It would have taken me forever. Matter of fact, I would have never been able to get to work if I had waited for Fredericton, because the lineup was just way too long to get there to do it. So I ended up going to Miramichi as well. And This was prior to the Blaine Higgs getting the majority government, mind you, and there was no mandates. So the security guy, I think it's probably might even be the same guy. Because I was there twice actually, and it was the same dude. So if it's the same guy, he was actually pretty reasonable, but apparently, yeah, he's just following orders, right? That's the fucking problem with these people. Like, let me bring.
All right, am I back?
Yep, you're back now. Right on.
All right, I'm good. Okay, I don't know how. I'll go back to what I was saying. So, Operation Dark Winter. I'll read it again. Was code name for a senior level bioterroristic attack simulation conducted on June 22nd, 23rd, 2001. It was designed to carry out a mock version of a covert, widespread smallpox attack on the United States. So, why I mentioned that? Governments know that biological warfare is a valid tool that could be used in warfare. The same way you can murder people with bullets and with bombs, you can murder people with sarin gas, chemical warfare, biological warfare, and that's what the future is holding. It would be way easier to sneeze on someone or let out a cold or virus to go and kill a bunch of people than physically go and shoot them with a gun. That's too in your face. People might resist that. But if you just go in a crowd of people, nobody's going to say, "Oh my God, that guy's a murderer." So people have gotten more smarter and more, and that's, killing people has gotten more refined and more, and they've gotten smarter at doing these things. So this Operation Dark Winter in 2001, the United States military played out a mock scenario. Hey, what would it be like if a biological agent was released? And through this scenario, if you go and research, and Canadian governments have run the same military scenarios as well, because you got to prepare for these things. The same way we have a fire exit, we have fire extinguishers. You prepare for the unpreparable, and so they prepared for biological warfare, and they have manuals explaining what your governments would do in these situations. And they basically say that they would round up the citizenry, and they would put the ones who are resistant of vaccines or ones who were considered viral threats if they were roaming around the public because they might have been infected with this virus. They'd put them in isolation centers. And that's what we're seeing being built right now in Canada and what's going on. And what I think happened with the first version of the coronavirus, this COVID-19, when people are trying to, I looked at that scenario as a giant Milgram experiment and as a way for them to send the dye out in the water and see where it seeped out and how it spread around the globe. Because the government overnight, if these evil, corrupt people that I believe that they are, they're not just going to release a bioweapon and it just, let it go in the world and see how it happens. And it might kill a bunch of people, it might not, because they need to do a test run, the same way that they do these test runs called Operation Dark Winter. So I believe COVID-19 was a giant test run, a giant program to experiment, to send the dye out around the globe and see how this thing could spread. And why would they do that? Because I think they have something planned more sinister down the road. I'm not so naive to think that the government won't one day or in the future release an actual really dangerous biowarfare weapon that'll have the actual death rate numbers that they projected originally COVID-19 was going to have. Maybe this virus 2 will be called COVID-20, COVID-2021. So maybe the secret, sinister, hidden plan here was to release COVID-19 to get the population used to the lockdown measures, to get it in your idea, to get you traumatized the thought that, oh my God, biological warfare is a thing that could actually happen. And then we find out that COVID-19 is a nothing burger, which it was, and they planned it to be a nothing burger. It was a mild strain of this thing that they leaked out of the lab. And then that way they can study it, they can see how it spread, blah, 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 blah. So that when they release the real true biological agent that'll actually kill maybe 1 in 10 or 1 in 8 or the high death numbers that they thought COVID-19 was going to have, well, now they've run COVID-19 experiments, so they're better prepared with all that data they gathered to gauge and to steer the next more dangerous biological agent to be released. When I say this, I'm not talking out my butt either. If you go on CNN and watch Bill Gates, he literally says, we've been planning for a biological agent to be released. That's the worst thing, is a biological terrorist attack, blah, 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 blah. So this is, I think, where the future is moving. It's moving into these biological warfares and these agents, and not actual physical hard red war where you're actually physically fighting in the streets. So this is what scares me, because if they did now in the next year or two release a really deadly virus like the Black Plague, Then you got people like me and my father for the last couple of years, or since COVID's been coming out, we're screaming at the top of our lungs, this is a nothing burger. Look at the numbers. It's a nothing burger. It's basically the flu. It's a nothing burger. And then once the real agent gets released, me and my father are going to be like, is this another nothing burger? Like COVID-19? Is this one real? Maybe we'll be more, maybe we will want to go public and not social distance because we're like, probably another fake one like the first one. Or now me and my father will be disproven. Now the second virus that they release actually does kill 1 in 10 or high numbers. Then it's a way that they can look back on us freedom fighters and say, see, you guys were wrong. You actually got a lot of people killed by spreading your disinformation, saying that COVID was a nothing burger. We told you it was going to be something serious. And, there's so many ways they could spin that second release of a more deadlier virus to really screw us over in the liberty movement, to really take the narrative away. Even if Trump wins, here's what I need to tell people. People think that Trump's going to win the election and then it's just going to be rainbows in the sky next day, and then the grass is going to turn green, and then, whoa, we're back to normal. Trump's in. It's a peaceful world. Evil people never stop at night. They're always working and conniving and thinking, how can we commit more evil? How can we commit more evil? And these people are not just going to, like I said, relinquish their power so easily. Even if we arrest a bunch of them, there's probably some that will slip through the cracks. They'll maybe fall back a few years on their step, but they'll slowly build back up. What does that guy say? Liberty is forever vigilance, basically, or something. They're always going to be coming at our
the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. Yeah.
Exactly. So we have to always be on these guys. And now this should red pill society to realize that, I actually think that these biological weapons labs are fucking a dangerous idea. The same way that nuclear power is kind of a thing as humans. We build the nuclear power plant because, like, well, we need power. But if the thing ever blows up, we're like, well, we don't really have a way to deal with it. We kind of just throw ocean water on it. I don't know. We never really anticipated that. Well, this is kind of how I think of these Wuhan virus labs. And it's not just Wuhan virus lab. There's many of these labs around the globe, ones that are open to the public to Google, and ones that are in secret, deep military bases that you're not even talking about and the public doesn't see, that are working on these deadly viruses. And it scares the hell out of me that these people are working on these deadly viruses in these hazmat suits, and one day one of these things could leak out. This is something we need to have a conversation about as a population, the same way we should have a conversation about how nuclear power plants are. We decide it's like a sell-off. It's like, oh, well, we need the power, but if shit hits the fan, we're all screwed. If this plant blows up, basically anyone in the vicinity is going to be nuclear reactive. So we need to start having the conversation. Maybe we need to start shutting down these virology labs. Maybe it's not worth it. I know they'll try to say, well, we need to study these deadly diseases and pathogens as a way to find cures. But it's like, you guys are dabbling in dangerous shit. If any of that leaks out, we're all screwed. You see how quick someone in Wuhan can let something leak out, and as you can see, can literally infect the entire globe to the point the president of the United States got this thing. And this is what people like America and Trump, you better go after China financially and criminally for what happened. We know now that the CCP knew early about this thing, and they told everyone it was a nothing burger and let this thing release on the planet. So everyone who's locked in their house right now, everyone who's wearing muzzles right now, everyone whose businesses have all went bankrupt, the CCP individually is responsible for that. Those people, when my father reads that 1 in 4 youth thought about committing suicide, and probably a decent amount actually went through with it, the CCP is responsible for that. There's blood on these people's hands. There's blood on Hunter Biden's hands. There's blood on the CCP hands. These people need to be held to account, and we need to start having actual conversations about, hey, should we even have nuclear reactors? Should we even have these level 4 bioweapons labs that if something goes wrong, we don't really have a backup plan? Like, I think it should be, you should only build things that if it goes wrong, you have plan A, B, C, D to deal with it. But if you build something, it's like, well, if it goes wrong, we have no way to deal with it. Don't build it then, man. Like, why would you ever build something like that?
Yeah. Well, like while you were talking, I brought this up, and it's funny because it just happened to be come out today, or was it yesterday? Or actually, no, it might have been earlier this week. I was just going through, like I say, because I go through CBC radio because, like I say, that's one of the few places that you get some really decent programming. And this one here was, this was from here, did I share that yet? Actually, let me make sure I get that share. Yeah. So as you can see, it's another one. So when people are like calling people conspiracy theorists and talking about when you're talking about COVID-19 or the fact that central planners and governments are doing some crazy shit, this is all revealed. It's all been exposed. It's all been admitted. The CIA was busted back in the day with this MK Ultra, and I'm sure many of you who watch these videos have definitely heard of it. So, when you have the establishment media even admitting, right, the fact that there's actual real conspiracies, they're not just theories, folks. These theories have been proven to be factually true. So conspiracy theorists, when they use that term, towards people, when you're talking about COVID-19 or any other political, social, or economic issue, when they're using that as in such a negative way, as more or less to turn or to tell you to don't pay attention or turn your backs on these people because, they're nuts or they got tinfoil hats on, right? Well, the fact that they know that governments do conspire and in some pretty nefarious ways, right? Because when you're talking about MK Ultra, you're talking about fucking mind control. I mean, how much more crazy do you get when you're talking about conspiracies, right? The attempts to control the minds of the masses, like mind control. But yet, as we're seeing time and time again, the evidence comes to light that this shit does take place. Now, this one is called Brainwashed, the Echoes of MK Ultra. During the Cold War, the CIA secretly funded mind control experiments on unwitting Canadians in a program codenamed MK Ultra. The experiments laid the groundwork for modern day torture techniques, and victims and their families are still seeking recognition and justice. And when you talk about torture, it doesn't have to be physical torture, folks. Matter of fact, I think some of the most prominent and powerful torture techniques are of the mind, because that's the thing, your mind. I've even said this before too. If I broke my arm or a leg, or you punch me in the face, I get a big swollen eye or get a busted nose. All of these things can be fixed, and they're usually remedied and repaired in fairly short order. Even a broken arm, I've had it happen to me before, and within a few weeks or up to 6 weeks, you're back good as new. But you mess with the person's mind, their psychology, their confidence, their ability to think critically, that can be very debilitating. And we're seeing that's why I would no doubt make the claim myself why most people today are on some kind of mind-altering drug or using some kind of alcohol or like I say, illicit drugs or gambling. People are trying use all kinds of methods to try to find some semblance of normalcy or to break free from that constant inundation and negativity that the media has been constantly putting and jamming into our heads, so that we're constantly scared of everything around us, right? So mind control does take place. And the fact that this is the kind of stuff that took place, 50, 60, 70 years ago, well, ask yourself, if they were that good at doing it back in, when 50 years ago, think of how much better they are at doing that stuff today. And think about the fact that social media also definitely plays a key and pivotal role in this kind of mind altering or mind control that's taking place today. So it never went away. The attempts of big government or central planners to manipulate the minds of the masses, it's never gone away. It's only been ramped up to the point where, like I say, they're actually doing it and exceeding some of the capacities in an amazing degree than what they could have ever done in the past. Let me just read a little bit more of this. So this was by Michelle Shepard, Lisa Ellenwood, and Chris Oak. This was reported on October 21st, 2020. The following story is based on material from the CBC podcast Brainwashed, a 6-part series co-produced with the Fifth Estate that investigates the CIA's covert mind control experiments from the Cold War and MK Ultra to the so-called U.S. War on Terror. The series is available on CBC Listen, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts. When Lloyd Schreier tells the story, it sounds more like a conspiracy than his family's tragic past. But many of the details are laid out in a thick file of documents, correspondence, and reports. He has news articles and pictures spanning decades, all describing what his family went through. And he and his mother's heart-wrenching medical report that is still hard for him to comprehend. She had her 30th and last day of sleep on March 24th, Schreier said as he reads from the 1960 hospital record. Now, anyways, folks, like I said, I won't read the entire, it's a really, really long article, and it's part of a 6-point series, and they actually include all 6 parts of the audio form of that. So definitely check that out. That'll be in the description of this stream as well. Because once again, if you understand what they were willing to do and what they were capable of doing that long ago, then at the very least, you should really question the so-called experts or central planners and how much they have the ability to control your mind now in 2020.
Well, that's just it. I did quite a bit of deep research into the CIA program MK Ultra, and I'd first say to people that what they've declassified, what you can find on CBC, is probably 10% of the actual program. But let me give you an idea of what they actually let you know they did. So my father says brain control and brainwashing techniques. This consisted of sleep deprivation, so keeping people up for certain periods of time. This in one scenario, they injected people with things and drugs that made them go in an induced coma for weeks at a time. They'd put them to sleep for weeks at a time, induced comas. Electroshock therapy, literally zapping and frying the brain in an attempt to rewrite it and to try to erase memories. Literally, they would stick electrodes to the brain. Didn't feel good, folks. A lot of pain. If you watch the videos, not fun. And these are the things that they did. Operation Climax as well is another one. But here's another one we know that they did that's been declassified. So LSD is a hardcore psychoactive drug. When you take it, you could even see visions and hallucinations and stuff like that. So can you imagine if you took LSD and you knew you took it, then mentally you're prepared for the hallucinations. You won't think you're crazy. But if you were just sitting at home one day sipping a coffee and you had no sweet clue and someone dropped a hit of LSD in your coffee and you have never done LSD in your life, you never even would have suspected it was in your coffee, and then all of a sudden you're sitting in your living room and you start feeling these weird effects, and you see hallucinations, you see visions, it would scare the hell out of you. It might even make you think you went crazy. And this is what the government did to unwitted Canadians, Americans, and other people they experimented on. They gave them LSD without their consent, without their knowledge. They tripped balls. Some of them literally thought they were going crazy. Some situations, patients committed suicide after this stuff. And like I said, this is 10% of the program that you know about that was declassified. There's also the experiments you can tell that, they learned that if you took a baby from birth, from its mother, put it in a crib and just fed it and give it water, just the necessities, but didn't give it any human contact at all, that the babies would die. That's how vital human touch and contact is to a developing child's mind, that literally the child could have the natural resources for the body to live, but without the human contact, the child would die. Now, I would say to people that people don't realize when they hear that is children died to learn that experiment. Many people have been experimented on throughout history. The Nazis experimented on people. Dr. Megula, Dr. Evil, all these things you hear throughout time. So governments have a track record of doing experimental things on people. And like I said, what they tell the public is 10% of it. When you actually go to these military black operations bases and stuff like that, where stuff that you'll never hear about, they've killed people, they've tortured people, they've done everything in your worst horrific, if it was like a Saw movie and you could watch those horror porn movies, they've done everything you can think of and more your government has done in the guise of science to understand how the human brain works. Okay. So, and one of the things that they've learned is by, if you take a child when it's in its first we understand now, science has proven that in the first 5 years, I think it's like 90%, 85 to 95% of a child's brain is developed. And then you basically have from 5 to 25 years old for that last little bit of imprinting in the brain to grow. So science has taught us that if you get a child from 1 to 5 and you traumatize the hell out of them and you do terrible things to them physically, mentally, and all these, you can literally affect that child for the rest of their life. And that's what the government's doing. That's why, schools, it was before it was kids went to school, maybe grade 1 or 2, and then kindergarten got introduced, and now it's pre-kindergarten. And soon the state's just going to be like, just give us your kid after it's born. We'll raise it for you. And that's what the CCP, that's what all these control freaks and authoritarians are. There's literally a war on for your mind. There's a war on for your children, because they know that if they can get a hold of your children, then they got a hold of the program. And people need to realize that we're only a couple of generations away from not even knowing what freedom looks like. And I would liken it to, you have poor China, the poor people of China, enslaved by the CCP. And when I say this, when I talk about anti-China stuff, I'm not talking about the Chinese people. A lot of them are good, and they're ruled by an iron fist. But you don't see what's happening in China. China basically is one big shed, and they have all their people inside of it, and they have no windows on the shed. Nobody can see out. So China doesn't know what's happening over here, and the same way we don't know what's happening over there because they suppress and block it. So if there was actually a civil war going on in China right now of its own people rebelling, you wouldn't even know it because they wouldn't blast it and let people know around the globe. They wouldn't let foreign reporters in to report on it. So, what's happening to us in first worlds is shocking. It's terrible, and we're now seeing how corrupt and sick our government rulers are. But what goes on in other nations will truly scare the hell out of you. So if you can sit here as a Canadian and think, listen, I ain't going to take an experimental vaccine. I'm not going to be forced mandated another year or two in my house. I'm not going to be under house arrest. I'll fight that. You think you'll fight that, but if generationally I pound it into your head and take your children at a couple years old and raise them in nothing but propaganda and put them in the shed with no windows and never show them what freedom looks like, in a few generations, you get to the point of you can't understand what freedom is or fighting for freedom because you don't even know what it looks like. You've only been ever brought up in these crazy environments. And that's the whole spirit, Stockholm syndrome, that was a whole medical experiment done as well and it was proven that literally the human brain is so complex. It learns to adapt. If you're constantly abusing someone, their brain gets to the point where it's like, well, the abuse is so much to handle. I have to rewire myself to deal with this. So it literally starts to love and enjoy the abuse and abuser. It's called Stockholm syndrome. It's a real thing. And this is what governments are doing on a mass scale. This is why, CBC even talks about brain control and mind washing and stuff like that, because they're trying to rub it in your face. They're trying to desensitize everyone to it. They're trying to get you used to it. And the TV, the programming, the flicker rates, the algorithms in the social medias, you get Jack Dorsey and all these other people saying, oh yeah, we designed the apps to give you dopamine hits. We designed the video games so that you level up to make it more addicting. You go and you watch your kid playing the video game. He's on the system for 10 hours. And oh my God, how can you? They literally are designing it. The developers of those programs, those games, those apps say we developed it so it's more addictive in your brain than crack or cocaine. That when they put you underneath an MRI scan and they scan your brain, you playing on the social medias, you tweeting on the apps, you playing your video games is showing the same dopamine hits on the brain waves on the MRI scans than you taking a hit of cocaine. This is where we're at, folks. It's full on war for your mind right now.
Well, that's the thing. And in addition to that, well, obviously not just China, but we got lots of history right here in good old North America. And I just brought up a couple more examples, and I'm going to have these linked in the description of the stream as well for you folks. Although, like I say, most of you will already be privy to this knowledge. But for those who aren't, let's just refresh people's memory. This was reported from the Atlantic, but you'll find all kinds of sources if you just type it into your favorite search engine. Doesn't matter if it's Google, DuckDuckGo, whichever one, Bing, whatever. Anyways, this is under in the Atlantic, under health, rethinking one of psychology's most infamous experiments. In the 1960s, Stanley Milgram's electric shock studies showed that people will obey even the most abhorrent of orders. But recently, researchers have begun to question his conclusions and offer some of their own. January 28, 2015 is who this was reported by Carrie Brown. Anyways, it goes on. And like I say, this is just one example. I just typed it in, brought up this as one example so that you can read through it. Once again, all you have to do is type in the keywords of the Milgram experiment and you'll get as much information as you need with that. And there's even YouTube videos if you go onto YouTube. But in addition to that, let me bring up just one more example because, like I say, that's just one of them. And that's, shock therapy to the point where the guy might even be, causing the other person on the other side of the experiment. It might be causing severe detrimental or may even bring that person to death. But because the person in a lab coat in a position of authority or one of these experts told him to do so, well, the person conformed his own morality, his own thinking, right? His own reason, his own logic that was probably, occupying his mind. But he pushed that all aside because I just got to do what I'm told because this person is an expert or someone that's in the field that has knowledge that's much more vastly superior to my own. That's the problem with people. You need to think critically, and you need to use your own logic and your own reason. But like I say, let me bring this up. So here it is. This one was the Stanford prison experiment. Now, I'm just getting this particular link is from Britannica. So it's the Encyclopedia Britannica online with the headlines Stanford prison experiment, social psychology study. Those are the key words. The Stanford prisoner experiment, a social psychology study in which college students became prisoners or guards in a simulated prison environment. The experiment, funded by the U.S. Office of Naval Research, took place at Stanford University in August 1971. It was intended to measure the effect of role-playing, labeling, and social expectations on behavior over a period of 2 weeks. However, mistreatment of prisoners escalated so alarmingly that principal investigator Philip G. Zimbardo terminated the experiment after only 6 days. More than 70 young men responded to an advertisement about a psychological study of prison life, and experiments. An experimenter selected 24 applicants who were judged to be physically and mentally healthy. The paid subjects, they received $15 a day. Now, you got to remember, this was back in 1971, were divided randomly into equal numbers of guards and prisoners. Guards were ordered not to physically abuse prisoners and were issued mirrored sunglasses that prevented any eye contact. Prisoners were arrested by actual police and handed over to the experimenters in a mock prison in the basement of a campus building. Prisoners were then subjected to indignities that were intended to simulate the environment of a real-life prison. In keeping with Zimbardo's intention to create very quickly an atmosphere of oppression, each prisoner was made to wear a dress as a uniform and to carry a chain padlocked around one ankle. All participants were observed and videotaped by the experimenters. So anyways, folks, like I say, I'll place a link to both of these in the description of the stream below. And once again, you'll find out how easy or how susceptible people are to conforming or being obedient to these experiments in terms of authority. This is the point why libertarians, anarchists, voluntarists, people who are critical thinkers, people who don't believe in subjecting themselves to rulers, that's why it's so vitally important, and why people like myself constantly hammer home on a regular basis the importance of, there's lots of issues we got to deal with. But the number one issue that's going to keep us down is the belief in authority, right? It's okay to see that people might be in positions where they are more competent in particular areas, but to be willing to subject yourself or to conform to people who are supposedly in positions of authority without thinking critically or without testing some of their premises with your own abject understanding of what morality or ethics entails, without doing any of that or without thinking critically for yourself, you can place yourself into these positions where, like I say, a lot of harm. Now, fortunately, these were experiments where no real harm took place because they were experiments. But these kind of experiments are happening and taking place every day all around us in the real world, and there's causing real harm, both social and economic, to a lot of people. That's why, like I say, you need to think critically. You need to be able to put on your big boy pants or your big girl's pants and start pushing back against some of these so-called experts, because the willingness and the obedience to conformity is the most detrimental thing to the human race and the human species.
Yeah, you only need to look into Julian Assange busted with the WikiLeaks, a lot of the Gitmo prisoner treatment. They had these men naked, stacked on each other with collars around their necks. They were whipping, beating them. They were sticking their batons up their rear ends. Like, you don't, like you said, this is a Milgram experiment conducted in a controlled environment. Yeah, what's happening on the CIA black sites around the globe and stuff, you people have no idea how evil and sick people are and what your government's capable of. And I think that's what scares most people.
Yeah, I've already heard some people say that this is considered, this whole COVID thing and how governments and experimenting with the lockdowns and the mask mandates and the potential mandates for the vaccine, this is the Milgram or the Stanford. This is an experiment on an unprecedented level. At least these experiments were with small numbers of people, or even if with MK Ultra, which had, a much higher degree of participation from the public and different organizations within the government. But what's taking place today, It's being done and coordinated by governments all over the world. So this is a global experiment on a grand scale to figure out who are the conformists, right? And maybe that's what it is. Maybe all that data is going to give all these central planners and these experts, people like that want to emulate, people like Trudeau who want to emulate and duplicate that basic dictatorship under the CCP in China and having this social credit scorer system. Is this is a way to find out who are the people who are unwilling to conform, to be obedient, right? Because we can weed those people out by using big data. They'll easily find out that, hey, Matt's not following orders. Matt's not fucking conforming to what we tell them. Bennett's not doing it. So is this a way to create a new list, right? Is this Schindler's new list kind of thing? No, but we know, and that's another thing that was a real thing that took place, right? So we all know that this grand experiment, and it's has yet to be completely unfolded. Who knows how much longer this is going to take place, folks? But once again, it's vitally important that we push back against this stuff and help educate and inform our fellow citizens, and to stop worrying about people labeling them conspiracy theorists. Because that's something that, like I say, the insiders, the hacks in the media, the political and the ruling class, they love to label you a conspiracy theorist. Or people in your inner circle, maybe some member of your family, some friend that you have, labeled them a conspiracy theorist for daring to challenge this kind of orthodoxy or these grand experiments. Why? So that you'll be willing to turn your back on them, because they know how important it is for people to maintain their reputation. And people are always seemingly willing or susceptible to go along to get along, as long as it's not damaging to the reputation. Well, I've shown them a willingness many times over, and so has Matt, and so has a few others, that I'm willing to challenge anyone. I'm willing to put my reputation on the line and say what needs to be said, regardless of how many negative connotations or insults or derision is tossed my way. And it's important that you do the same thing, because that's the only thing, like I say, that's how you become like Teflon Don to the South, right? The media tries everything possible to take him down, but because he's so unwilling to allow it to affect him, right? That's the grand psychological experiment. And that's one thing that I would like to emulate in terms of Trump. Maybe there's a lot of things about Trump that I wouldn't necessarily want to emulate or practice in my own personal life, but having that kind of courage and the conviction to stand up and, like I say, be that Teflon Don and let them throw whatever the shit they want at you. Because once they realize that it won't stick, well, that's where your power truly lies.
Yeah, like you were just saying, like this giant COVID-19 lockdown experiment of this released virus, like you said, that's going to give them so much metadata and so much data as a giant experiment. Like you said, it's conducted on a global scale, so you have such a pool of data to gather from. Exactly, you can now study how different countries and cultures reacted to the lockdowns. You can now, like you said, build a list of those who were dissidents and who resisted and wanted to conform. You can also now gather through that data. Is it 1 million people who didn't agree with us in Canada? How many people was it really? And then you can start thinking, do we have enough police officers that if overnight we wanted to black bag them, is that even physically doable? Or is the numbers too high, we couldn't? It just is, like you said, it's a giant data sweep and a giant experiment for them to gather. And that's why I take it to its next logical conclusion, which I'm going to ask you what you do. And if you agree, if you see them playing out this giant Milgram experiment on how people would react if a virus released upon the globe and how the people would react to that, don't you, like me, take it to the next logical jump that, well, if they're practicing, if they're having this test run in this giant experiment of seeing how the virus and how the people would react to lockdowns, is it possible they're doing a test run for something like the real run? Usually, it's same with military operations. When I see American soldiers and they drop them in the Nevada desert and they're doing test mock operations in the desert, and it's like, well, why are you guys training out here? And the commando says, well, our sergeant says we're training in the Nevada desert because we're probably going to be deployed in Afghanistan in a desert environment. Or they drop soldiers in the forest and vice versa. So I look at it as a military operation and look at, well, geez, if they're practicing this virus test run experiment, is it because there's a second real program? Are they actually planning on releasing something? So I think that's why I bring it up. And it's not like people like to say it's a conspiracy theory, but it's not. It's just using logic and following out the conclusion. Is usually people don't run experiments unless there's a motivation behind it, whether it's to gather data from it
Yeah.
or to actually, when something happens, then they know how to deal with that experiment.
Yeah. Oh, it's all done for a reason, right? It's all done for a reason. But anyways, Matt, if there's something else that you wanted to cover before we tied up, because I do get to, unfortunately, because I got to work tomorrow, and I know I'm going to be really, really busy this week. Me and Aaron, we got to start throwing in the rest of the wood. We got a big pile of wood, so I want to get that done and put in the basement, so we have some warmth warmth there for the winter. But anyways, before we do tie it up, if there's anything else you want to cover, and maybe get a couple points out there, and then we'll tie it up and get ready for the next one.
Well, I would just tell everyone and everyone watching on a final point that you see your government, they're dressing up, they're arming up, they're running tests, they're running scenarios, they're brainwashing, they're doing all these things, they're taxing half your income. They're not doing all this for no reason. So like I said in a previous video, if you look across the battlefield and you see your enemy loading his guns, cleaning his guns, putting his soldiers in battle phalanx positions and gearing up, clearly they're not doing that for nothing. Clearly they're gearing up for to go to war. So as I study the media, as I study the news cycle, as I study government, how these control freaks are enacting the lockdown situations, when I look and see Trudeau order enough vials of vaccine for every single Canadian here, when I see them building isolation COVID centers, when I see them systematically weeding out the good cops and only hiring order followers, I'm seeing it logically as my enemies getting ready for war. And the people need to take it like that. You know, your government's doing all these actions. They're not doing it for no reason. You know, Trudeau isn't going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on vaccines if he doesn't plan on using them. So I keep telling people that when they're like, oh, no, they're not going to mandate vaccines. It's like, why the hell would a business go and buy all this inventory if they don't plan on selling it? If they're just going to sit on it.
Yeah.
So they clearly bought a vial and a vaccine for every single Canadian because they plan on giving a vaccine to every single Canadian. And they're clearly writing the legislation when Randy Hiller gets on the Parliament floor and asks the Trudeau himself, hey, okay, you're building isolation facilities. Can you explain this why? And they say, next question. Clearly there's a corrupt. Clearly they're hiding stuff. They're not building the camps unless they plan on packing them with people. They're not buying the vaccines unless they plan on sticking it in your arm. So folks, get ready, get woken up. And I guess my challenge and where I guess even myself, I always wonder is, I feel like all of our freedom fighters are out there, and there will be resistance when this stuff happens. But I feel that we're so spread out, and with the media censorship, that they could very easily try to just black bag the majority of all the bigwigs in the freedom movement and maybe take us out overnight. You know, look at the movie V for Vendetta too. That was all based on this similar type of situation. So I worry that, you know, Stefan Molyneux, he lives here in Ontario as well. I'm in Ontario. My father's in New Brunswick. Up here in Ontario, you also got like Maxime Bernier. You got Dan Dick. So you have a lot of people here in Ontario with me. But what I wonder is, if tomorrow they pass the mandatory vaccine legislation, or they pass all the stuff that makes it head towards civil war territory, or if one day I get a knock at the door and it's the government agent saying, listen, are you going to take the vaccine in your arm right here on the front door, or do we got to take you to the isolation center? That me and Stefan Molyneux, me and my father, me and Dan Dix, me and all these other freedom fighters, we're all spread out so far that we need a game plan. When the enemy comes, we can't all just be in each other's homes, because then there's no resistance. If you got 3 or 4 cops show up at your door, or UN officials wanting to give you a mandatory experimental vaccine, and it's just you and your family, you don't have much of a chance of resistance versus if you could have your neighbors come to your aid and stuff like that. So I only worry that there's a lot of freedom fighters, but we're so spread out and we're so sparsely populated around all the countries around the globe that when shit hits the fan, the Milgram experiment has been played out, and they know now where we are. We're on the Schindler's List, as you say, and they're just going to overnight, in the middle of the night, every one of the Stefan Molyneux, Dan Dix, myself, you, one night, we're just all of us, when it happens at a certain time, we're going to get a knock at the door and we're going to get black bag potentially taken away. And at that point, because we're all so spread out, there's not going to be the resistance that we need. And so, you know, that's why I always like the Joe Rogan, what he's doing, and even me, myself, and my family and my fathers have had talks like that. Like maybe we need to start all moving to one state. Maybe we need to start all coordinating ourselves to live in amongst each other. And, you know, I'd feel a lot better living in a condominium or a community than knowing that everyone in my apartment building is an anarchist or a libertarian, or, you know, that way, then at least if the police comes to your door, it's coming to the door of a community that everyone around him will rise up and rebel versus, Stefan Molyneux wouldn't stand a chance in Mississauga. I mean, there might be a lot of freedom fighters in the area, but they're not living around him. They're not going to come to his aid if he gets that knock on the door one night. So I think myself, I'm having these thoughts. Hopefully the Molyneux and the other people in the world are having the thoughts that we need to start not only putting out the message, which we're doing very effectively and good, and break down through the firewall and unite the world to rally around the principles of peace and freedom and not authoritarianism and control. But we can't be so naive to think that we shouldn't also organize. Because if there's one thing I've learned about my enemy, the government, as you can see, they're organized. They're buying the vials of vaccine. They're building their army, robotic army, whether it's actual robotics or police that are willing to just follow orders. I mean, just look at Australia, Melbourne, and the police willing to do what they're doing with the mask stuff, and even now happening in Canada. So I just worry that when the switch gets flicked, that we're not prepared for what's coming.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just brought this article up here. Trudeau announces plan to purchase 76 million doses of Canadian-made COVID-19 vaccine. And if you take 76 million, I checked on our population because, you know, that's the thing. Immigration may have been slowed down, but it hasn't ended entirely. And we know under the mass immigration program in recent years that they've been attempting to bring in 1 million Canadians every 3 years to this country. So it's been a rampant rise. But even with the rampant rise in the increase in the population over the last few years, we're at 37, we're almost at 38 million now. But if you think about it, what's 38 times 2? 76. Right? So that's like 2 vaccines for every man, woman, and child in this country that they're ordering. So it's not just a matter of, well, we want to have enough for everybody and maybe a little bit extra, right? Which makes sense, for population growth. But why, like I say, 2, basically enough purchases for 2 vaccines for every man, woman, child in this country. So who knows what the reasoning is behind it. We also know that they're doubling down on spending money on not just, this is a Canadian-made potential vaccine, but they've also been out there spending money, right, hand over fist, not theirs, of course, taxpayer money, forced theft or forced income redistribution, but they're spreading this. So what they're doing is they're making sure that there's redundancy built in. So they seem pretty willing to make sure that the Canadians have their doses, have their vaccine. Why? And like you say, K Bono, who's benefiting big government, pharmacy, like big pharma, and these institutions that, well, you won't even be able to hold them to account either. That's the other thing with big pharma is, and some of these vaccine candidates, is there's all these disclaimers so that even if something happens to you negatively or you're harmed by one of these vaccines, well, you can't sue them, right? So that's the thing. There's a lot of people who are going to make not just a lot of money, but gain a lot of prominence and even more authority by having all these pretenses of, or ability to do these things. But if you don't have if you have enough for basically 2 vaccines per population or for the entire population, you just got to believe that they're going to try to mandate it. Why have so much redundancy built into it, right? Why have such a stockpile like that's so in excess to what your population would ever need, unless you're willing to, like I say, make sure that every man, woman, and child is inundated or forced to have one of these vaccines. And who knows why, like I say, why they're spending even more than what would be needed or necessary. Maybe they're planning on ramping up immigration once a vaccine is already, right? So maybe they're like, oh yeah, we might only need 38 million for now, but because our plan all along, it might have been placed on the back burner, but the plan is still there for mass immigration, the great replacement, as I've called it, for Canadians to keep sustaining the entitlements and the unfunded liabilities that the boomer generation have been waiting to they've been benefiting from it all along, but they want to be able to continue that long off into the retirement years. And maybe that's the whole thing. They're going to bring in this mass immigration influx once again, and they're going to need this massive amount, because what have they been saying? I've even heard reports in the past, and I've reported on them in some of my past videos, where they were suggesting to get the Canadian population up to 100 million people, right? 100 million people they would love to bring 100 million people in this country before, I don't know if it was 2050. Don't quote me exactly on the timeline. But yeah, they want to ramp up immigration to levels that are much, much higher than they already are today. So
think about, actually, you just made me think about something right there.
Yeah.
When you say they want to bring up the Canadian population up to 100 million, they don't want to stir Canadians to have more children to have 100 million to bring the population up. They want to bring the 100 million in from the third world.
Yeah.
Now think about China, who has got their hands in the pocket. They got China, who's got their hands in Trudeau's pocket. You got Canada, who's strategically the neighbor of America. Yep. So if you as a CCP can send in 100 million immigrants into Canada, and you can change the culture of Canada to maybe be more susceptible to socialism and communism, you now have a communist base right on top of America. What a good strategic platform. So you damn right they're looking at Canada as a way to build a base there, as a way to make friends, because yeah, it's a strategic neighbor to the Americans.
Right on. All right. Well, like I say, so unless there's that pretty much, is there anything else you wanted to say, or you think we're good for today, or?
Yeah, I think we're good. It's just, people, like you said about the vaccines and stuff, they're preparing all this stuff. They plan on obviously using it. I think they've calculated the risk of a resistant. I think they're running the numbers now with all this data now that they got from the lockdown measures, and they're going to make a calculated decision on whether it's worth it to go through or not. And I always close my eyes and think of the scenario like you got some evil churchgoer, and he convinces all of his followers in the church one day to take a Scion pill, and he just takes a sugar pill, and then everyone falls dead around him, and he's the last guy in the church, and he just running around like, woo, I'm the last one. I get to enjoy all this free land. I'm going to tip their pockets and take all their money. And I kind of look at like that's how this might go for these elites that want global eugenics and population control. And what a better way than if they could design a vaccine that maybe doesn't kill you immediately, but maybe it takes a week or a month, and then they dole out and they make, also what's going to be interesting to me is how quick they push the vaccine. So if they say, we're going to push the vaccine and we want the entire Canadian population vaccinated in 1 month, or let's say a couple months or a year, by taking prescription medications, it takes usually years for side effects to come out. Sometimes not, sometimes they're immediate. But I always worry that, they get the entire globe to take a vaccine over in the next month, and then in that month, that vaccine kills all the people, and the elites that didn't take the vaccine or had the serum, the magical vaccine that actually cured them. I think they've even written movies about that. How a virus gets released, and the world controllers release it themselves, and they are the only ones that actually have the vaccine that actually can heal them, and everyone else gets a fake vaccine, and they all die when they take the fake vaccine, and they take the real one and survive, and then now they got the fruits and the glorious world to themselves, and they have a bunch of robots that can bring in the army to take care of them.
Well, I don't even think, the more I think about it, I don't think they're going to end up, possibly I could be wrong, but I don't even think they're going to end up having to mandate the vaccine, because they do realize that there's at least a substantial portion of the population who won't conform. And the thing that bothers them most, I think the one thing that keeps them up at night are a lot of the anti-vaxxers, as they like to use that negative connotation of people that don't necessarily just fall in line with sticking needles in their arms by anyone or for any reason, right? But they love using that terminology. But what they recognize is there's a lot of people on the left, like a lot of people that would call themselves or identify as progressives or leftists, right? Or some of these social justice warriors or leftist activists. A lot of them are these anti-vaxxers as well. So what I think is and this big thought, this big social experiment, how I think it's going to unfold. Once again, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm just speculating here. Fairly reasoned and informed opinion, as far as I'm concerned, is they're going to keep us suppressed just long enough, right? Because that's the thing. It's taken a long time. And we're already, 9 months into it? Let's say a vaccine doesn't come out for another half a year, maybe another whole year. If you get 6 months or a year longer, more protracted, where we're all having our social and economic lives destroyed and hampered, right? And the mental anguish and the aggravations and all the angst and pent up anger and frustration and resentment and, you know, all the myriad of the emotions that we're all going to experiment over this time, and the negative connotations that this whole COVID-19 lockdown and restrictions on our social and economic lives. I think what they believe, and I believe they're probably in an area where they have some anecdotal evidence from the past to suggest that if you keep people susceptible to this kind of environment for long enough, you won't have to mandate it to them. They'll be yearning for it. Please, please just give me something so I can get back to something remotely resembling normal. I can't take it. My mental health is destroyed to the point where I don't even know if I want to live any further. Please just give me the needle so I can fucking put away all the pain and anguish and get back to life. And that's the other thing. They know there'll be they'll still, even if it takes a year, 2 years, they know there'll be a majority, a very small majority, who still will be like me and Matt, be like, no, I'm still not going to do it. You can fuck with me for years and I'm still not going to conform. But see what it is, they won't have to mandate, but they will know that you got maybe a husband or a wife or a sister or a brother or uncles or nephews or nieces or mom or dad or grandpa or all these people that are part of your life who will be themselves saying, listen, Bennett or Matt, just do it for me, please, so that we can all get back to having a normal life, please, because we all have to have it to build our herd immunity. And if you don't do it, well, that means I'm going to have to go through even more harm. And so they're going to make the pressure, and the pressure is going to be all on us to yield and conform once again and comply so that the rest of society can get some false pretense or semblance of where they can get back to normal. But in reality, that'll be just one more step further towards the complete and utter, not just lockdown of society, but the lockdown and suppression of people's willingness to think critically or challenge these so-called experts or central planners. That's what I'm worried about, is that they're not going to necessarily have to mandate vaccines, just like in some places they're not necessarily mandating masks, but people are willing to do it anyways as a means to virtue signal of their conformity and to more or less bully or intimidate others who won't into doing so. That's the way. Horizontal or peer pressure works much better for the political class than using the big heavy hand or the heavy fist of the state. And they'll use either way. Whichever one's most effective is what they'll end up choosing to do in the long run. And that's what I firmly believe. And that's my last thought on that for today anyways.
Yeah, and my last thought is, when I think of things that are tracked, chipped, and controlled, I think of cattle. And, that's basically what the ruling class thinks of us as, is cattle. Yep. And they use us as a way, they've had to keep us around for the last thousands of years, right? First, it was the slaves. They had to literally carry all the rocks out of the mines and build the pyramids with their hands and blah, blah. So the ruling class needed people back then because they needed to get their grapes and fan them with their leaves. And then slowly we've gotten better technological, and now they're starting to need the cattle less and less, and they own the monopoly board. They basically have all the money in the few hands now. They don't need us anymore, and we're being tracked and chipped like cattle because they plan to take us to the slaughterhouse, and that's where all this is headed. And like my father just said, there'll be people that'll be running to vaccine, and the scary part about it is the people who don't want to get the vaccine, they could very easily, like I said, release an actual deadly biological agent out then who could actually then wipe out the people who chose not to get the vaccine because then they actually got affected. So there's so many ways that this could go. And, I hope we can deal with it now and tear the Band-Aid off, because literally all it would take, what I would think Trump should do, is Trump now knows that, they tried to take the election from him, steal it with the Russia collusion. He now knows that this virus, China knew about it early and they let it out. Trump should be making a call to his SEAL Team 6 guys and all these black crews and saying, listen, round the Nancy Pelosi's up, round the CCP up. It's a few million people over there, and round them all up and deal with them now, because, yeah, you deal with them now, we're still going to have issues. They're still going to buck and scream. They're still going to want to fight. But rather now than, down the road, when we keep kicking the can, it's only going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And there's a chance right now before this election and leading up after it, with Trump in power, that he can go arrest a bunch of them, stop the plan, blah, blah, blah. But if we don't start putting the brakes on here soon, I think we're almost past the point of no return. And I'm so well read of history to look back and see
genocide after genocide, World War I, World War II, the Jews being burnt, ancient history in Rome, ancient history in Egypt, to think, oh no, we can't kill a bunch of people. Man, we've killed a bunch of people all the time. That, like, man, people need to look up the death numbers from World War I and II and just realize that, don't be so naive to think that it can't happen again here in the modern era. The difference being, though, is, an AK-47 can only kill so many people before you got to reload the weaponry. And the left like to talk about, we need to take the guns. They're so dangerous in the hands of people. What about a guy who can soup up some kind of virus and let out the plague in his shop or something, or in his little chemical lab? So, there's bigger things and way easier methods to kill vast majority of the population versus physical guns. And you're damn right the government has invested and looked in and developed these methods. And they scream about Saddam Hussein using gas against his people and blah, blah, blah. And the white cake powder and blah, or yellow cake powder. But, the true people that you need to be scared of are these CCP guys and the government that are allowing all this stuff to happen. So just be vigilant. And I hope we're not in for a dark winter like Biden slipped up, Freudian slip and said there the other day on the debate stage. And I hope that that's not what the end goal is. But if it is, you've all been warned, and history will prove through this podcast that we were all right.
Right on. And that seemed like a perfect time to end it. So we'll see you folks in the next live stream. Have a good one. We'll see you then.